We're about to start this, what do we call it, a retreat?
Retreat.
Before we do, I'm going to stand for a moment of silence, follow that by the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. Anyone who cares to join me, please feel free to do so. Join me in the pledge, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let everybody know Mr. King did text me a minute ago and said he was running. Oh, there he is. Oh, no, that's Mr. Lacey. I can't see halfway. Thought that was him walking in the door. But he said he was running a little bit late, but he was on his way. So we'll see him shortly. And with that, first item on the agenda is district capital. And
well, I think I'm going to do a little bit of stage setting before we begin. Mr. Johnson loaded an agenda, or it's up on board docs with kind of a preliminary agenda, and I will I printed out and then didn't grab it off the copier. A little bit of a detailed agenda. I'll go get that, and anyway, I'll just run through a couple of things I wanted to highlight before we get started. One, just to set the stage for the day. We tried to hit the topics that everybody has been mentioning, wanting more time to delve into. And so I've got about 15 minutes right here at the start, and I'll set the stage for the day and then make a couple of announcements. And then we've got Ms. Brown and Mr. Harrison to talk about purchasing and capital. I've also got the school level requests, and I'll talk you through that a little bit at the end of theirs. Say at 11:30, we're going to go into closed session and talk about safety, and Katie Brown's coming down with her team to share updates on safety. Then we'll have lunch. We got Dos Bros for lunch. Maintenance with Andy Brown from 1 to 1:30. Ms. Dam from 1:30 to 2:30 for special education. And then Frankie Skinner at 2:30 for instruction, some updates there. And then hopefully we'll have enough time in there for questions and thoughts. Let me give you a couple of updates, and then we've got a few minutes here if we want to talk about them. And some of them I'll probably just redirect into the time to see if we have any questions after the presentations. So one thing I want to talk about is the White House Intermediate Principal position. We advertised it. Obviously, we got two new schools opening next fall, Liberty Creek Middle and White House Intermediate. Liberty Creek Middle, everything's set there. They're just in the Liberty Creek High School building, so they'll just move into the new building. So there's not really any personnel changes or anything like that. It's just literally moving from one location to the other. White House Intermediate will not be as disruptive as it was when we opened all the Liberty Creek schools, because White House Intermediate is basically taking 2 grades from H.B. Williams, 3rd and 4th grade from H.B. Williams, 5th grade from White House Middle, and moving them into the new building. Now there will be some additions, obviously, a lead educator, a principal, guidance counselor, some staffing that you have to have on each school for it to be a school. So we're going to go ahead and we will name a principal at White House Intermediate before Christmas. The advertisement will run for 2 weeks. And then, so sometime after we get back from Thanksgiving, we'll do interviews and we'll make an announcement on White House Intermediate principal probably a week or so before Christmas break. We'll have to, we'll want to talk to that, for instance, if it's an existing principal that's going to move, we'll obviously have to take into account that person wanting to share with their faculty, but we'll try to get that done. If you're in the White House area, we've got a lot of questions about how that process is going to work, and a lot of people that I've tried, like when I've had emails, I've tried to tell everybody everything's going to be okay, no one's going to lose their job, you're not going to have to re-interview, anything like that. But we want to, before Thanksgiving, we want to put that out and help everybody kind of calm down and understand that there aren't going to be bold moves coming up with White House Intermediate. Most of the positions will be filled just by staff being reassigned from H.B. Williams and White House Middle to the new school. But we're excited about that opening up in the fall. I wanted to talk a little bit about zoning. Okay, so we had talked over the past few years, Burris especially was adding 80, 90 kids a year. And we were concerned that we were going to have to do some rezoning back over to Beach Elementary and Hunter. I think we'll have the option now. Interest rates are at 8.5% or 8%. The average home price over there around Burris is about $700,000. It's pretty, with Durham Farms where the new houses are coming in, it's pretty steep pricing. We're not seeing, I'm going to pass this around. This is the 3-month membership report. So if you look, as this comes around, I'll talk through it just a little bit for the sake of time. You know, this was the first time in 22 years, I believe, that our enrollment has gone down instead of up. It ticked down from 30,500 and something started last year to 30,346 last month. And if you look at those numbers, they're pretty stable. And so with that, Burris Elementary has had 3 principals in 3 years. Dr. Reynolds went to Liberty Creek Elementary. Dr. Anglin was there for 1 year and then went to Good Pasture, and now Ms. Lyles is there. Our preference would be we've got enough capacity in the school to catch whatever growth we catch next year. I think, you know, if we can go a year or two without having to rezone, it gives that school time to settle, have some stability with leadership, and not disrupt 2 school communities. So my recommendation would be for us to stay pat, give another year. We will have to look at some things like staffing wise, like we'll probably have to add a second AP at Burris. There's a few other things. Ms. Brown will run those ratios when we get into budget season, and we'll add staffing as we need to accommodate what Burris needs. So all that to say, White House Intermediate, we will run all the hiring decisions for White House Intermediate other than principal when we do our regular hiring. We usually cut everybody loose after spring break to hire, and so we'll do whatever hiring there is to be done at White House Intermediate on that same time frame. And then recommendation is to stand pat on zoning for Burris and Knox Doss. Knox Doss is sitting right at 600, I believe, 602. It's been pretty consistent. That's a good number for Knox Doss. We're running pretty solid there. Mr. Flood is looking for another 100 or so kids so he can add a second AP. If he finds them, we'll give him a second AP. But that's where we kind of are right there. And then I want to talk a little bit about something. I hope by the December board meeting, I'll be able to share with you Sumner 2030. I would love to be able to bring all the stakeholders from the county together. Mayors, county commissioners, school board members, alderpersons, chambers of commerce, community boosters, parents, different things like this. We did this in 2014, and it was really productive. It was a great day for us to sit down and do some long-term planning. That would be, you know, us putting some topics on the table. You know, I can tell you we have done November, December are my first run at principal evaluations. And so I've done 19 so far in the last 2 weeks. It's been great. We've gotten to spend an hour in each building with principals, and it's been great. One of the things that we're hearing a lot of is behavioral concerns. And so, you know, the more we think about that, we've got some big initiatives coming up. We actually met with principals this morning. Katie Brown's team did a tremendous job laying out some very simple things that can be done to address student needs. A lot of it is, you know, if you've ever coached sports, you have the folks on the sidelines that holler, run, kick, tackle. I mean, I told the principals this morning, Ted will remember when we played beach when they had Jalen Hurd, he carried 8 times for 6.5 miles. And one of the parents, after about the 4th carry, yelled, catch him. And it's like, that boy would catch him if he could, but he's not going to be able to catch him. But, you know, some of the things we've done is we've asked people to do things in terms of building relationships with kids by saying, go build relationships with kids. What we started working on this morning with Katie's team, and this Dr. Becker presented for about 30 minutes to principals this morning, was very specific things you can do, looking a child in the eye, talking to them, investing 2 minutes a day for 10 straight days, having, you know, if you have a kid that has a bad day, gets in trouble, The next day you seek them out and talk to them, say, hey, yesterday was a rough start. Let's set a goal. What are we going to do today? Just some very simple things like that that we're really working on. We've got a big initiative that we'll share with you a little bit later next semester. We have trained 116 teachers and administrators on something called TCI. It's a way to, when you come into a situation that's escalating, to bring the temperature down, right? Like not like old school, you know, if you had an old school coach or administrator where if you raised your intensity, they raised theirs. You know, what we found now, if you ever go, like I can remember going and watching Miss Bethany Stapleton, she was the chorus teacher at H.B. Williams. She's at White House High School now, and my daughters were both in her choir, and you had to go once a semester and volunteer, and she had 60 fourth graders in there. And she could run the whole choir, and they moved like a small army, and she never raised her voice, and she had these hand signals, and like they would park, like 30 of them would go this way and 30 of them, I was captivated by it. And it's because she didn't escalate, right? She de-escalated. And we want to have the same language, the same grammar, the same conversations across the building. So that's coming in the fall, but I'd love to be able to lay out some of these things, not just to the school board, but to all the community stakeholders around, so we're all speaking and emphasizing and supporting the same things. So that's Sumner 2030. Some other upcoming things in January, Mr. Ott has been working on a presentation on compensation. We're going to, Ms. Brown, Amanda, are you going to talk about the budget process in your presentation today?
I'm not. I mean,
okay.
I can answer some questions for sure.
Yeah. We're gonna change the process, right? In the past, we've done school level meetings first, the last 2 weeks of February, and then each department meets with Ms. Brown and with Dr. Phillips in March and early April, and then puts the budget together for May. We want, because we've got to do some heavy lifting on compensation, and that's going to require, you know, a lot to get across the finish line for what we're looking to want to do for compensation. I think everybody I've talked to is pretty much in agreement that we want to do a heavy lift on compensation this year. So we have to start early. I've already had some conversations with Mr. Shove because, you know, if you're on the commission side, you've got not only teachers, you've got sheriff's deputies, you've got highway crew, you've got all the county side too. It's going to be a big lift across the board. So we want to start early so we can start having productive conversations about compensation and just be very truthful about where we are and where we need to get. We've moved mountains on compensation. Teacher pay's gone up $9,500 since January of 2020. But, you know, to stay competitive, we're going to have to continue to increase our pay, not just for teachers, but for classified staff and across the board. They've done yeoman's work meeting with a bunch of different people across the district and getting feedback on where we need to be for compensation. So that presentation will come in January from Mr. Ott. I know several of you have asked about long-term capital projects. I'm going to share with you after Ms. Brown's presentation. I've got the list of what principals have requested. I will tell you that I pulled off all the safety items because Ms. Brown has got those, and I don't really want that on a document that's just lying around. So we can absolutely talk about some of those, but most of the things that were on there were fencing, doorknobs, lighting, stuff that we're already addressing through our audit process and the work that she's doing. So I did pull those off. And then I took the top, we asked them to rank order, so I took the top 5, okay? Because some schools put 23 and some schools put 1. So, and some of them aren't truly capital, some of them are instructional things. That's a conversation. I didn't really went over the list a whole lot, but I wanted to be able for you to be able to see what schools are requesting. I also went through and highlighted what we've already accomplished and done. Yes.
I've got 2 lights on. Are you ready to take any questions yet?
Yeah, let me one more thing and then I'll be ready to take questions. We've got long-term capital projects. I think some things that are going to take a little bit more digging from Mr. Brown and his team. Paving, roofing, HVAC, safety Ms. Brown's been working on, and SMP, school nutrition capital. Those are things that we really need to, like, I'm talking like a 5 and 10 year plan here. I'd like to get some big picture items and things and get that out there for y'all to look at as we're in the budget cycle. And of course our athletic facilities. I'm sorry, Mr. Brewer.
Thank you, Chairman. I actually just received a phone call before I came here and a couple of text messages We've discussed the fence at North Sumner. They're right now driving posts, cutting the playground area. They're cutting out parts of the playground. Some trees the kids really love to play under. They're cutting them out with the fence and some kind of tether ball. I thought we discussed we weren't going to do that with their playground.
Yeah, we can check on it. I thought that's what we talked about.
If you could do something now, you could stop them from driving posts.
Volleyball, there's a volleyball court that's outside of where the playground area is, and that tree line's not actually ours. So they've asked us, it's outside of the,
I mean, I've gotten some pictures.
Hang on.
it's outside of the track, and the playground encompasses all of those areas. We spoke
Yeah.
with them yesterday, the only thing was the volleyball, which is not actual, it's just posts for the volleyball.
Okay. So let me look at Mr. Lacy. I think like the tree line's not ours.
No, this is our property. It's up
Okay.
by the school. There's the really big tree, I think, that's under the swing set, and then there's a couple smaller trees.
Okay. Katie, can you check on that for us? Okay. Yeah, we'll get that checked out.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Mrs. Andrews?
Yeah, kind of going back to rezoning, I know obviously the Burris area is a huge growth area,
Mhm.
but we've also had, some feedback as far as Gallatin High School.
Mhm.
I know, previous discussions, past years and stuff like that, we've always said that kind of the goal for our high schools are to be about 1,600.
Mhm.
It obviously is kind of within that range, it's a little high on that, but is there any thoughts as far as, Gallatin, just because that has been brought up, if kind of, again, is it a year of just holding steady and kind of seeing where the pieces fall, as far as that before we look at it kind of encompassing next year, or?
I'll be honest, the feedback on Gallatin being overcrowded is coming from people that don't really have much to do with Gallatin High School. I'm not hearing that from Gallatin High School people.
Okay.
I mean, obviously you would always like it to be that 1,500, 1,600 would be sweet. Gallatin has the largest number of early grads, so they will probably have about 40 or 50 that will come off of this number, and there'll be about 1,640 or so after Christmas. So it gets more manageable as the year goes on. The cafeteria is the pain point, and the biggest pain point really at Gallatin High School right now in the cafeteria is getting enough cafeteria workers. So some of the, like I've talked to Dr. Becker. I've got to talk to Andy Brown. There's one place in the central walkway that they would like widened, and so we're gonna talk about doing that because that's a choke point. But like in terms of class size and things like that, I don't necessarily know that it's the problem that it's being made out to be. Like I don't hear that from the administration of Gallatin High School.
I went and spent some time with Dr. Becker, and I was kind of the feedback that I received too, that it was the cafeteria is a point. I know that they're having to use, I think administration is swapping out and stuff to be able to try to make that as effective as they can for the students. And then, yes, that one particular bottleneck place just for flow of traffic and so forth. I do think that will help with the building. But like I said, I know with the growth in Gallatin and so forth, I know sometimes when we talk about growth in building, that doesn't necessarily also equate to children, and it doesn't equate to high school children. So
And it doesn't equate to, like, for instance, Syntex is 1,100 homes, right? But those homes aren't going to open tomorrow. They're going to be staged out over many years. So we will absolutely have to rezone at Gallatin. We'll have to push some kids to Station Camp and some kids to Liberty Creek. But you want to do that in a way that it supports Gallatin High School. We also want to manage, Liberty Creek's gone from 600 to 800 to probably close to 1,000 next year. Those are big jumps. Like we've got the physical space and we can add the staff, but you want to give a school, if you talk to, I've got a friend that's a principal in Williamson County, and her school went from 500 to 800 to 900 to 1,100 to 1,500. Now they're at 2,200. That's like, reopening a school 4 times. And so it was hard culturally for them. So we want to smooth some of that out. But the good news is we've got the capacity as those homes at Syntex and other places start to come on, some of the ones back on Lock 4 and some of the others, we've got the ability to slide to Station Camp. We've got the ability to slide to Liberty Creek, but we've got to do it at the right time to do it. We're saying we're not there yet.
okay.
Andrews, Mr. Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The principals list, you mentioned that you were highlighting like the top 5 things. Are we
Yeah.
getting the complete list though, and you're just highlighting the top 5 things?
No, I'm giving you pretty much, there were a couple, like some of the ones that I cut off aren't really capital items.
Is there a way to get
Sure.
the entire list as well?
Yeah, sure.
I'd appreciate that.
Mhm.
Mr. Lancaster?
Going to, just looking at this list real quick, talking about enrollment stuff. Looking at Liberty Creek Elementary,
Mhm.
what is the capacity at that school? I know
Yeah.
the concern there is, and I know Carrollton's just
Mhm.
continuously growing. And I know, we started out with what, 450 at that school last year or something like that, and then or we thought we were going to have 450.
Yeah,
We opened and we
it
had
came
like
in at
550.
575, something like that. Yeah.
I guess, what are we seeing the pattern there? Are we?
Yeah.
You know.
I think it's going to be something we're going to have to monitor. I think what we're going to see is, like, for instance, the entire time I've been here, Creekside, it's one of the big subdivisions feeding Liberty Creek. Creekside forever has had 280 elementary students in that neighborhood. But the houses used to be priced in Creekside, used to be $300,000. And people would live there with elementary kids and then move somewhere else when their kids got older. So there was always a constant restart of 280-ish elementary kids. Those homes are now selling between $550 and $650, and interest rates are like, it seems what's happening around the county is that some of these subdivisions that have always had younger kids are now aging up. So families are not going to be as mobile as they have been within. I mean, because you'd see, like, typically a lot of what you see is people move from Creekside to Carrollton or one of those. So there's still going to be growth at Liberty Creek Elementary, but I think you will start to see, instead of a constant restart where those numbers run the same, I think you'll see some of that shift to Liberty Creek Middle, and the numbers, I think you'll get like a short-term increase, and then it'll either stabilize or drop a little bit at Liberty Creek Elementary. We're going to absolutely have to watch that, though.
And with I guess if we're not doing, mandatory rezoning or anything, what schools do we have, I guess, capacity that we could do a lottery potentially to add? If, just for some of
Yeah.
the schools that may be low and.
Yeah, so I think there's 2 components that we need to think about when we're talking about lottery. We can technically, any place we have space capacity we can do. What we've tried to do is manage it based on personnel. So like we could, because if we open up a lottery, like let's say Beach Elementary is one that we would have capacity to do that. If we opened it up for 50 students to come via lottery, we're having to adjust staffing for that school based on those 50. So we want to space that out accordingly. Some schools, for instance, Williamson goes through, they assess every school, and they'll have, like, you'll see some of the schools that'll be like 3 second grade slots or 2. We've always, just since this new law came into effect, because of the mobility that we've had in opening new schools, we've limited it to just to a couple schools. We could certainly expand those options, but just to understand, like, we could add another 300 kids to Beach Elementary, but then we'd have to either move staff or shift staff, and there's a cost that comes when we slide staff around.
When's the typical, like, I know you wouldn't want to do that June or July,
Right.
obviously, but when do you typically, is it February that we do the?
We've done February in the past. We're going to do Liberty Creek in January this year, because I think it gives parents time to apply. It also, kids start, for instance, for high school, they start trying out for stuff. There's different things. So the feedback we got from parents is that would be better to do early. So we'll do Liberty Creek in January.
And it'll be just middle and high,
Just high.
just high.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
I didn't know what the middle school looked like.
I think probably after next year, or we might consider opening up the middle school. I just hate moving buildings and going through all that transition. It'd be nice to have a year to just sit, let everything. We're not catching explosive growth in any area, especially in middle school where we feel a real pinch. So I think letting the dust settle a little bit, and then that'll give us time. If we want to adapt, I think it's a great conversation with the school board to have. Do we want to have a more expansive lottery policy? I'll tell you, my hesitations for high school are this, that, for instance, if you look at Murfreesboro, Oakland, right? Murfreesboro, Oakland has an international baccalaureate program. They have a few other programs that are unique to Murfreesboro, Oakland. shockingly, soccer players and football players are overwhelmingly interested in those unique programs.
I have no idea why.
And they have suddenly become a state soccer power in addition to a state, and those are concerns. Sports doesn't drive everything, but we want to be equitable to the other schools as we think about some of those lottery situations.
But even with the lottery, even if you do the lottery, you still have to abide by TSSAA transfer rules.
But you can live on the moon when you go in ninth grade. The TSSAA has no policy on ninth grade entry as long as it meets your policies. It's just that's where you start your academic or your athletic record.
Okay.
Just real quick too, with White House Middle School, that number includes currently their 5th grade, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So remember that that's not counting, like, it's a smaller number than their other grades because you have Millersville and Oakmont come in at 6th grade to
Yeah.
White House Middle.
But I do understand that.
Yeah. It's about 150, 160 kids. Okay. Well, at this time, I'll turn it over to Ms. Brown and Mr. Harris. I'm sorry, Mr. Brewer. I'm sorry. They're up next.
Oh, go right ahead.
Sorry.
So I think you guys have met, hopefully, Chris Harrison. He's our purchasing supervisor. And I know he's been at some meetings. I don't know if he's formally, I can't talk today, presented. Sorry, numbers are better for me. And so Chris is going to be here to talk about kind of our purchasing policies and kind of what that looks like. There's, you see a lot of things said and a lot of things put out there that aren't really accurate. And so I wanted to make sure everybody kind of understood what our policies look like, especially considering we have some huge capital kind of coming down the pipe. And then I'm going to kind of go over just our capital listing. There was some discussion, I don't remember, a meeting or two back, there was some confusion around one of the numbers, so we just wanted to literally give you a line item list of every single capital project that was out there and kind of what that looked like. So, nope, wrong way. So here's kind of the topics for the day: capital, our board policies, the purchases, and then competitive purchasing, and just some different information about that. So the first thing is I kind of just went to the GASB website, which is the Governmental Accounting Standard Board, to kind of just pull kind of what they have as capital. Not everything we think about is considered capital. A lot of times what happens is something actually might be a repair or considered repair and maintenance. So when you look at a principals listing, or we talk about certain things at buildings, they're not always considered capital. And they also, so therefore I can't necessarily pay for them out of my capital budget. To pay for those, we would have to move them out of capital and into a repairs and maintenance type line of contracted services. And so just kind of making sure everybody kind of understands that not everything we do, like especially Andy Brown, not everything we do is considered capital. It's really those, what you kind of an asset. And so you can kind of look at that. I just literally copy and pasted it: land, improvements to land, easements, buildings, building improvements. And so that there's a fine line, and Mr. Lancaster can attest to that. What is a building improvement or what is just a repair? There's some discretion there, but not everything that we would think of as a building improvement is always capital. Vehicles, obviously, machinery or equipment, works of art, we really don't, that doesn't really apply to us, does it? And historical treasures also doesn't really apply. Infrastructure and all other tangible or intangible assets that are used in the operation and have initial useful lives extending beyond a single reporting period. For us, a single reporting period is a year. And so I just kind of wanted to give you guys that definition, because there is some confusion on that, and there are, we get a lot of questions in accounting, and we sometimes have to research, will we consider this capital or is this more repair? So just giving you guys that. So yeah, got it. So here is here's a complete listing of every capital item that we have kind of in the works this year. So if you'll look at the top, that's $16,452,000. What that's comprised of, there's a little asterisk and there's a note at the bottom. That's comprised of the original budget in the major the 76-100 major category. So we do have capital sitting in individual department major categories. So think of a major category as those individual pages within your budget. So we do have capital sitting in like the finance department for myself to buy computers for my staff, in the transportation department to buy transportation equipment. So there are capital items sitting in individual budgets, but those are kind of managed by those departments. This 76-100 is more managed at a district level. Mr. Langford is the one that really, him, myself, Chris Harrison, Andy Brown, we all sit down together and look at those together. So those are a little different than what you'll see in just a regular department budget, and usually larger also. And so up in that amount, you've got the $16,052,000 that was in the original budget, and that number hasn't, to kind of give you an actual good picture of all the projects, we also included the $400,000 that was amended in from our reserve balances for the year, because once that was amended in, that was used for projects. And I'll specifically call out a project so that you can see, because it looks a little unusual, that Station Camp soccer building. So that it was a combined project that started at the end of last year, and they had their school allocated funds, and they also had booster funding that came together to make that 275. So what you're seeing though is both of those were amended in, and that's why that number went up. So that one was partially from last year's board allocated funds. So if you kind of look through the different projects, kind of want to just give a little bit of explanation. It may kind of sound redundant, and so I apologize. So you'll see on here what we call obviously estimates. You'll see things that have actual PO dates or board approval dates with PO dates and PO numbers. So if you see something with a PO number, that means it has actually had a purchase order issued for it. So that's been board approved if it was required, and a PO is issued. So that is, PO is a legal contract. So that is in process currently. What you'll see where it says estimates, these are things that we know we all have discussed. Mr. Langford has put on some of his presentations, some of the projects that we are wanting to complete for our schools and the different areas. And so, but we may not have them bid yet. So if you're seeing that as an estimate, what that is showing you is that we have not gone through the formal bid process for that. And so we are putting in our best estimate for that. Please note that that number can change once we bid. It could come in a little bit higher, it could come in a little bit lower. But I have worked with Andy Brown, especially we discussed yesterday the HVAC units, where we thought that would come in. Originally it was a little bit lower, but as he's talked to, and that's for the auditorium at GHS, sorry. As he's talked to vendors, he's thinking that it'll come in a little higher than our original estimate on that. So you'll see that the word estimate, that exactly is what it is. It's an estimate of where we think that the funding will be. And then you'll see allocations too. And so an allocation is just so we all kind of understand, is that money has kind of been set aside for those particular projects and being held so that those projects can be completed at a later date. They may not be bid yet, we may not have all the information we need, and you guys, I don't know if you remember us talking about, there was some safety initiatives, the $715,000. So what it was determined earlier in the year that, you know, there was several large safety initiatives. Ms. Brown also has several safety grants this year. So we were partnering with her as a district with our grants and with our funding to get some of those completed. So those may not all be encumbered right now, but that money is specifically, we've given those funds basically to Katie to use for safety. So those are allocated for safety. So she has projects in the works and plans in the works for those funds. Same thing with some of the other ones, like you'll see Liberty Creek Middle School furniture and fixtures, White House Intermediate furniture fixtures. Those are allocations. Obviously those are based on estimates, but they could come in a little lower or a little higher than those estimates. But we will try to stay, because we've allocated that fund, at or below that. I'm trying to think of any other ones that might be confusing. You'll see 3 on there right now that our bids have come in that are pending board approval for tonight. That's that awning. There's a BHS Annex HVAC upgrade, and then the Gallatin Small Gym. All of those bids, Chris and his team have put those out for bid and received those bids, and we have an estimate, and you'll be receiving those tonight for approval if you so choose to approve it. So that's why that looks a little different. There is no PO, but if you approve that tonight, Chris will be issuing those POs. I do want to just call to your attention the bottom 3 numbers, the 163, the 150, and the 1.287. Those are sitting there as site development. If you add those 3 numbers together, that is the 1.6 site development that we've kind of tossed around and discussed and been confused about, and making sure we all understood what that was. Those 3 numbers there are what we have in site development. So not too long ago, we had that number at 1.6, and you can see since then we've had civil site design come out of that because it was site development. Also, we have, though this number will not stay long-term in the site development line, it will be moved once we have it bid into the appropriate category, that White House Intermediate playground equipment. I left it in there though so you could see that that is a expenditure that will be coming out of that initial 1.6 site development that we all discussed before. So this is, I really thought once we, discussed it, there was a lot of different movement. I thought it would be great for you guys to see literally every project line by line, the amount, where we are with it, allocations or estimates, and the PO numbers, so that would give you a better idea of what we have, with discussion. And so I know that there was some confusion on when I said funding is on the table. I apologize, Mr. King. It was back and forth from previous meetings. I wasn't understanding what we were saying. But so when we say that was on the table, that is the only funding right now that could be allocated elsewhere. And as Dr. Langford discussed, with that, we are wanting to hold those funds there because there is every day new things that are coming up with our schools that we're trying to open. Opening 2 new school buildings is a big lift, and so we want to ensure that we can open those on time. So that's kind of the explanation for capital. Is there any questions?
Thanks for that. I mean, this is helpful for me anyway. I don't know.
What do you say?
On Liberty Creek Middle and the White House Intermediate furniture fixtures, when's the plan to, I guess, order that or get that on? I mean, I know they're plans open in the fall, so do we have the same issues with delays and things like that ordered as we have had, and the sooner the better or whatever on that?
I talked with Ms. York just this week about that. It's her intention to have all the quotes together for the December meeting. There's no delays that she's aware of. We did this with Liberty Creek, and there were all kinds of construction delays, but furniture, we were actually waiting for the building to get ready so we can move it in. So at this time, at this moment, we can say there's no delays that we're aware of.
Okay. So you think December we'll have that, and that'll be basically no longer allocation, but moved to capital. As far as sorry, I don't know if that's still on or not, but as far as the remaining project expenditures, what do we know of anything that's still out there for that, or is that just kind of we know there will be more things and we're just waiting on when they arrive, or what's the plan there?
I think what we're talking about there is if we get something unexpected.
Okay.
Like I can't even think of a scenario, but if we, when we bid Liberty Creek Middle and White House Intermediate, it was after the construction prices went crazy. So, to make it feasible for us to be able to do it, there were things that were cut out. Most of those things were fine. But, there may be something, obviously when you run to scale, building 2 new schools, there's going to be something that we miss. And so having some money, for instance, I know Ms. York was able, after our previous conversations about accessibility, she was able to increase some of what we were doing at the playground at White House Intermediate and make it more handicap accessible, or usable, usable. So there'll be some little things like that, but probably, but you're talking about about $60 or $70 million in construction that have gone on, and having 1.2 million sitting there in case.
Basically, it's just a cushion.
It's a cushion.
Okay, that's
And
kind of what
yeah, absolutely a cushion, and then hopefully, if we get to April, May, and we're getting closer to completion, we'll be able to knock off some more of the things that are on our capital list.
Okay. And in a case where the furniture from those two come in higher than the estimate, so if they come in at 1.1 or something for one of those, we would just move line item, move that out of there.
That's correct. We could, if we so chose, we could take some of the money from the 1.287 and allocate that into the furniture. Any of those, and that is an estimate on that playground, and so that may come in, 175,000. It may come in a little less, but as we get those, we will update this so we kind of know our running totals on that.
And is this kind of typical with our capital budget? Like, when I say typical, I mean, we're at November and we've kind of got at least an idea of where we've either approved spending the majority of it, and, is that typical? I mean, did we?
I'll say everyone manages differently, and I will actually applaud Mr. Langford, or Dr. Langford. He has done a great job of sitting down and really prioritizing that capital this year. And so I would say that this is not exactly how we've managed it before, but I think it's a really great thing, and it helps us be able to plan and look forward. And I do applaud Dr. Langford for that. So.
Well, I mean, I agree. If we budget the money for capital and we've got capital projects that need to be done, just pull the Band-Aid off and do them. But that's kind of where I just didn't know.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest difference is we're just in a transition point. Obviously, from 2014 until 2022, we were either renovating schools or building schools. We had massive renovation projects going on, and so I think that we tended to try to think like probably the biggest difference between Dr. Phillips and me is and it's more timing than it is necessarily philosophical difference is that he was looking at the end of those renovation projects and things like that to see what else we could do around the county. We're not, I don't foresee for the next couple of years us, for instance, getting a $100 million bond to do updated maintenance around the county, where we would put a lot of those maintenance needs into that bond and solve it that way. We're going to have to work out of our local capital to get a lot of these projects done. So in response to that, we historically talked capital projects in February when principals came in for budget meetings, and then we would do capital projects the last half of the year, and then Mr. Brown, as we got closer to the end of school year, he would see how much money he had in his maintenance lines, and he would knock out as much like floor. You'll see a presentation from him later, floors at Howard, different things like that. He would go in and knock out as many of those projects as he could. We're in a little bit different position now where we're going to have to manage our capital and our projects differently. And so we decided to have principals come in during their strategic planning meeting in September and share those items, and that's helped us be able to identify some big ones and go ahead and knock those out. And obviously, the heat wave of August also illustrated some HVAC needs that we had. We didn't have to have a strategic planning meeting to know it was hot at the beach annex.
And I guess my final question real quick. So this year, with the whole stadium issue that we've had, do we think it would be a good strategy going forward to maybe have a capital emergency cushion in that we use reserve funds, that we can transfer over prior to
what we would have typically put in reserve, we'll just go ahead and put it into capital.
To at least a certain amount, just so that we can have this, I mean.
I think so. You just don't ever want to be, to be fair to the county commission, if nothing else, in a best case scenario, it adds a month to any emergency you hit, because you got to hit a board cycle and a commission cycle. Sometimes it's a month and a half. So if we can create that cushion in what we budget, y'all just need to understand, we'll just understand that we're going to have a part that's undesignated, knowing that we're going to have some needs.
Yeah, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we don't just go
crazy
spending that, but we also, it's more of a, if we have the biggest thing is, this time the emergency was a football stadium that we could somewhat work around. If it's an emergency where, you know, you really don't have that timing mechanism of going back and forth with the county commission or whatever, I would just, you know, like to at least think about that.
Yeah.
And I should have clarified, obviously that 15 million is not in these numbers.
Right.
That's separate and apart, but just to clarify.
Well, and I think we had, you know, basically, we, not taking the stadiums off the table, Mr. Lancaster, but, you know, we basically, like I asked them at the start when we saw some of our needs, and they went through and they found about 6.7 million that we could use on different projects, and that's where we've been. But yeah, I agree, having a cushion to be able to address some of these things, because there's always going to be something every year that we're going to discover that we need to do.
Ms. Hawkins?
Yes, thank you. I just need some clarification on one line item about the White House Intermediate Playground equipment. When Merrill Hyde Magnet opened, I was treasurer for the PTO, and we had to raise all of our money for playground. And so, number one, that was for the elementary school. And I know at Howard Elementary, we had to raise our own money for playground equipment. And I fully support playground equipment and funding. But how is this, first of all, I don't know what playground there is at Rutgers Stewart. And second, is this equitable to all the other middle schools as far as playground equipment, or is this just this one school?
So this is an elementary school. White House Intermediate is 3 through 5.
Okay.
We're splitting H.B. Williams because of the size. So H.B. Williams will be K2, and
So
White House Intermediate will be
intermediate's
3,
not
5. Right, it's elementary. It's the upper part of elementary.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So then my next question is, we're funding elementary playground. Are other elementary schools getting funding to support their playgrounds as well?
So we have, anytime we build a new elementary school, since at least Burris, I can't speak before then, we've built the playgrounds on them to not put that burden, because playground equipment is very expensive. So we've gone in, we've tried with ESSER money over the last couple of years, we've put, the big ones are called Catherine units, and we put, Norm, I think 5. We North Sumner, Clyde Riggs, Oakmont, Lakeside Park, and there's one more I'll have to look up, but we've tried to, because those Catherine units are, I believe, about $65,000-$70,000, so we've tried to go back in on our more higher economically disadvantaged population schools and tried to put those in there when we had ESSER money to do that. But I think that will be, I think moving forward, one of the long-term strategic capital things we need to talk about is how we upgrade, because you're right, it is very expensive. You know, so we want to be able to address those needs as well. Benny Bills Elementary was the 5th one.
Mr. Langford?
Do we have I guess you don't have a summary like this yet for, speaking specifically for the 15, I don't even remember, is it 15.2, what, the stadium and athletic piece. But, you know, some questions and comments, you know, that have been made on social media stuff, that money is specifically only for those athletic things, right? Unless we were to go under that, and then we could then say we were going to use it for.
Yeah, so those, we have specifically set those aside for that. Now, let's, by a miracle, if it came in under budget, the board, since that money is available, the board could vote to reallocate that to another project, but we won't have the kind of the detail. We definitely can have, we'll eventually have this for the 15 million, but as those go out to bid, we won't really have those numbers until the bids come in. And so once that does, though, we can even do it, if you like this format, we can do the 15 million and kind of show you.
I mean, I personally like this format. I mean, it just makes sense for me.
Yeah, so,
From a math
but
standpoint.
once those funds are moved into your capital, the board certainly has discretion on, you know, if that came in under budget, just like with anything else, to reallocate that to another project that you so desired.
And likewise, if for example, we come up $500,000 short, we could use this 1 point cushion that we have that makes sure that we get.
Correct. Let's say we have a huge HVAC unit go out somewhere. Hopefully, no, knock on wood. And if you'll notice, everything is allocated elsewhere, and so that site development, the 1.2, would be where that, if that was a capital item and not just a repair, that we would have to use those funds to replace that. So it is for obviously the intermediate, opening the intermediate school and the middle schools, but there is also, it also is a contingency for any other large capital item that could happen within from now until the end of the school year.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. Mr. Wise.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just kind of a curiosity question. I know you've been doing this for several years now, and if you go back to the previous slide where you define what a project is under what title it best fits, and I know you and your team are constantly audited by several different organizations. My question is this: how often do you or your team miss defining a project?
I have never had an audit adjustment for that. Now, I can't say that, you know, there wasn't a miss somewhere along the lines, but we've never had any sort of audit issue with that, and we've never had an audit finding or an audit adjustment for
That's
that.
what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Lampert, back to you.
Okay, I think, Mr. Harrison, are you gonna?
No, I got it clicked. And I know Amanda introduced me, but just a little bit more background. I started with the district in 2008. I've worked in various purchasing jobs through the district through the whole time. Started in operations, been in maintenance, and now in finance. And I've been in my current role since 2017. So just all the time that I've been here, purchasing has been my main function. Just kind of give you a little background on me. So the first slide you'll see here was talking about the board policy. These are the rules that you guys add on to whatever state law says. So you can be only as least restrictive as state law will allow, but you can be more restrictive than state law, and that's where these rules come in. I highlighted 2.805 purchasing, 2.806, which is guidelines for project completion and school-based projects, and then 2.809, which is vendor relations. So these are the guide rails that the board has authority to say, hey, I want you to be this much more restrictive than state law requires. And we generally have been a little more restrictive than state law requires. So we get into the purchasing process. The first thing you're going to see is the purchases under $2,500. So what this is where we've set a limit to where we don't require 3 bids. To request competitive quotes. This is not the formal bid process. This is just where we ask vendors for 3 quotes. We raised this limit several years ago. It was $500, and that was a very hard limit to work under. $2,500 seemed more reasonable. We requested the board approve that, and we've gotten to that point so far. So this is where we can go out and make purchases without getting bids. This is on a line item basis, and you're going to see in the next slide, but it's a word called like items, and we'll define that a little bit better. But just know these purchases don't require us going to 3 vendors to get quotes. You also notice on this slide that I went ahead and defined when we get purchase orders. We set our purchase order limit at $1,000. So all purchases, with a few exceptions, all these purchases have to have a PO in place before the order is placed. The exemptions that we put on here, just so you know, and this is just a few examples to give you an idea: bank fees, drug testing, insurance payments, legal services, membership fees, utilities. it would be a logjam to put a PO in place for that, because these are unknown numbers a lot of times, especially when you get into utilities. Of, we budget that, but we have multiple different vendors that provide our utilities. So to set a PO for that and try to encumber all the utilities, we would be in a constant state of flux, saying, this year the city of Gallatin utilities is way higher than the city of White House. So we've kind of took the rails off of that particular item to not request POs.
I want to explain one thing really quickly about POs, because in the business, like the normal business world, a lot of companies don't issue POs, but it is required in governmental accounting. And so when I came from the business world, it was encumbering funds was a little bit different concept. But basically, it's a legal contract that we have decided we're going to purchase that, but it also kind of sets those funds aside so that when we go to pay that, those funds have been set aside to pay. So you'll see, if you look at our financials, you'll see encumbered funds, and then once we pay that, it'll go to obviously the expenditures. But it sets that funding aside because we have decided that we want to ensure that we've decided that's what we're going to do, and it sets those funds aside as an encumbrance until we're ready to pay. So it's really for a lot of people, it's a very governmental type accounting, but it is required. So if you are in accounting at all, a lot of people don't deal with encumbrances at all unless they're on the government side.
And the purchase order also serves as a contract, and the Tennessee legislature passed the Tennessee Prompt Pay Act. So it's guaranteed for vendors when they receive this that they know we have a contract with you, we're going to pay our bills on time. We're not going to hold your funds indefinitely. Now, they do have to satisfy the terms, with which we can't hold payment until they satisfy those terms. But if they've satisfied all the terms, we're required to pay. And this is just a guarantee for them that we do that. Are there any other questions?
And sorry, I'm going to add one more thing. And so I have heard some discussion about going ahead and, we don't have to pay for it. It'll come out for next year. But once we sign a contract and we encumber those funds are encumbered during the school year. And so if I have an easy example, if I have $1 million sitting in a line and I encumber 1.1 million, even though I may not fully expend it until later, I'm over budget that year. So you cannot encumber more than your budget. And once you issue a contract, once we bid that and issue a contract, let's say for the bleachers, let's say we don't end up fully completing that until July 25th. And that's when we pay it because it's complete. I have to have the funds available and encumbered when we issue that PO. So I can't go over budget with an encumbrance. That would be a finding. Does that make sense? You have to have that. I see Alan, my accountant over there. He's nodding. So I just want to make that clear. Even if the payment's in different terms, it's that contract setting aside those funds, and it's within that fiscal year you encumber those funds.
Move on to the next slide. So the next slide gets into purchases 2,500 to 24,999.99. So this is all the items that fall into the 3 competitive quotes. You'll notice that I said in one of the bullet points, 3 competitive quotes are required if possible. You take things like plumbing supplies. We have about 5 or 6 vendors we send these out to. We tell them, hey, we need the response. If it's an emergency, typically I pick up the phone. But if it's something that we're bidding a project, we'll say give them a week to respond. If we only get 2 responses after a week, we move forward. We gave them the timeline that we needed the bids. That's not generally a problem, but it is a situation that comes up. There's also a chance that there's only 2 vendors that supply a product. So we do encounter that, but it's rare. As I said previously, there's a term called like items, and this is always confusing. This is the most phone calls I get is concerning this. It's the determination of likeness will be assessed on a case-by-case basis based on physical characteristics and substitutability. So what makes 2 things alike? What makes 2 things different? It's a constant question I get. I always go to people with plumbing supplies because it's the easiest explanation. Copper pipe and PVC pipe are functionally the same thing, but they are completely different in the applications that we use it in. So I don't look at that as a like item. So they're two separate things. So if the maintenance department was bidding, $1,500 worth of copper pipe and $2,000 worth of PVC pipe for projects, I would look at those as completely separate and apart items. And so if that was all that they were buying, that seems like that they should have to get 3 competitive quotes. They wouldn't be required. Our maintenance department is really good. They go ahead in those types of instances, and they just go ahead and get them, but it wouldn't be required. So the 3 competitive quotes, I always ask that they get written quotes. They may make a phone call. They may, however they want to communicate to the vendor, but I always request that they get a written quote so that when they submit the requisition to get a purchase order, I look at that documentation to make sure that they did reach out and get that. We do allow internet pricing as well. Amazon is a very good tool that we have. We have a good relationship with them. They can even provide us quotes. We have a business account through them, and they will work with us on quotes. But we can also get internet pricing. I just ask that they get the date and the time and the website that they get that from. And we'll move on to the next slide, which will probably be the one that generates the most questions. So the next is when we get into the sealed bid process. And sealed bid process is based off the bid limit that the state has set, which is in TCA 12-3-1212. We adopted the $25,000 a few years ago, and that's when the state had set the limit to 25. They'd moved it from 10 to 25,000. I may be off on my date, but it was I think in May of 2022. The state has agreed to raise that to 50,000. We've not brought that before the board yet, but if we so chose, and you so chose to approve it, we could raise that limit to 50,000 before we go to the sealed bid process. But the way that the process works is, the first thing is that we start with the specification. I need to know what you need, kind of what's the parameters of what you need. We have to leave it open for fair competition. That's state law. I can't write it down to the only you can bid this one thing, and this is the only thing that we can get. We have to keep it open and fair. So working with specifications can get a little dicey because people want what they want, but we got to stay within the state law parameters of fair competition. The next thing we do is we advertise in the local paper. So if you get the local Hendersonville and Gallatin news, you'll see in the sports, back of the sports section, you'll see the classified ads there. That's where these run at, is in those 2 papers. Then the next thing that we try to do is the length of time. You'll see on here a 10-day open period to receive bids unless it's demonstrated that a shorter period is necessary. The shorter period is the exception. It's not the rule. The 10-day is what I always try to stick to as a minimum. When we do bigger, larger projects that I bid out that may take more time for vendors to see it, to explore the project, we allow more time. We've allowed up to a month. But I always have to coordinate that in connection with the board meeting because vendors won't hold their prices indefinitely. We ask and request that they hold it for 90 days. Post-COVID, that's not the case. They've gotten better. We were getting bids that would only be good for a week. They're getting a little better than that. 30 days has been a lot better, but at a time, we were looking at 1 week. So I was opening up bids on usually Thursday to get it ready for the board agenda for the following Tuesday. So then after the bid period is done, we receive them in sealed envelopes, and then we'll open the bids, we'll evaluate the bids, and then make a recommendation to bring to you guys. We operate under 2 kinds of competitive bids. There's invitation to bid. Invitation to bid is where you're buying things. There's no labor involved. We may be buying a tractor. We may be buying an HVAC unit that may cost above $25,000. So this is just the purchase of an item. No labor component. We'll receive it. We'll deal with it when it gets here. The other is the request for proposal. Now, it could also be the purchase of an item, say an HVAC unit, but we're also having installation involved. The RFP gives us a lot more flexibility in making the decision process. Lowest and best bid is state law. We always look at the lowest bid first, evaluate it to make sure it conformed to all the requirements that we were looking for. If it's not, we go to the next lowest, and so on until we find the person who met the specification and met the requirements that we asked for. There's aspects of the request for proposal when we bid things like software related items. We bid an IT ticketing system a few years ago. We looked at that for functionality, so we created a bid where it was a technical and cost proposal. So we would receive the technical side, no cost associated in that, and we would evaluate it based off parameters we set, and that's all listed in the bid document, evaluate it, score it, and then we would move on to, if we got 10 proposals, we generally would list in the bid that we'll take the top 3 candidates that made it through the technical side, and then we would open their cost proposals and then evaluate based off the total project there. So that's where the request for proposals gives us a different type of flexibility in that. Is there any questions or? Okay. All right. The next aspect that we'll see is cooperative purchasing, and I referenced in there the 3 different codes in TCA that allow us to participate in these types of cooperatives. Listed in here, piggybacking off of other Tennessee governmental bids. We have used Bedford County for the past 2 school buildings to do the low voltage side, to do the security and things of that nature. So we piggybacked off their bid. That's allowable. I can't piggyback off of Allen County, Kentucky's school district bid or any other out-of-state school district or a government bid. I can't do that. I can only piggyback off of Tennessee governmental agencies. There's the federal GSA contracts, state of Tennessee contracts, which we use pretty frequently. The Apple purchases that we make are off the state of Tennessee contract. And then there's the national cooperatives. I've listed the ones that we're members of. The most recent one that we joined was Qualis Group. We've used them for net zero to do LED lighting in the 2 schools that we've done that. The most frequent one you guys will see a lot is Sourcewell. We use that a lot to purchase our IT equipment, computers. We buy Samsung TVs. We buy a lot of our technology through CDW, and it's utilized on this contract. The contracts are a useful tool. They're nationally bid, so we get a steeper discount. They'll have a minimum that they have to give us. Companies like CDW always extend deeper than their commitment to the cooperative because we do so much business with them. And the last slide that I got here is kind of some miscellaneous types of purchasing that's available. There's sole source, where goods or services possess specific characteristics that can only be filled by a single source or where exclusive rights exist. Emergency purchases, waiting to bid an item is not an emergency. The state has parameters: natural disasters, fire, mechanical failures, systems outages. We are not required, we're certainly not prohibited, but we are not required to bid out professional services for legal services, audit services, educational consultants, and similar professionals. And the last you'll see is the purchase of secondhand items. This is mostly utilized when we purchase a used vehicle. You have to have it registered in a national database. Kelley Blue Book is about the only one that you'll find, especially for that. You got NADA value as well, but you'll typically see when we present the purchase of a piece of used equipment, it's coming from a Kelley Blue Book, which is nationally recognized. And I'm open to any questions that you guys might have.
I have one thing to say about the emergency purchases. There's some very definitive rules around that for the accounting, and so we don't just get to say, hey, that's an emergency. A great example would be the beach bleachers. Unfortunately, the comptroller's office doesn't feel that having the Friday night football game, and replacing those is an emergency. But we did, because we found it was a big safety concern, we went ahead and demoed them as an emergency because of the safety concern around that. But unfortunately, when we went to actually replace the bleachers, that's not considered an emergency, and there's very specific rules around what that is. So.
Yeah, I just have a question about cooperative purchasing and piggybacking and all that. Is there an amount limit, price limit on those purchases if it's through a co-op? I mean, I know we have over $25,000. There's got to be bids, but in those situations, it doesn't. I guess if you're going through one of those programs, there's not an amount limit on that or minimum or.
No, sir. It follows the same competitive process. These cooperatives are required to meet the same guidelines that I would have to meet. So they would have to publicly advertise it. They have to go through an open process to receive bids, questions, issue addendums. Then they have to do an opening process. They have a committee that evaluates them, they score them, and then they make an award. So they follow the same process that we do to do that. So there's no dollar limit set by the state that I'm aware of, and I've looked in all these laws, and there's no limit on that amount.
Yeah. Okay.
Just to kind of piggyback on what I think Stephen said, and I think to kind of maybe not better explain that, but the purpose of the cooperative purchasing agreement is that somebody has already done that bid process and gone out and said, hey, this is the best price we can offer anybody across the state or the nation or whatever. It's like kind of, I guess, being pre-screened at the airport, more or less, is a kind of a good example. You've already gone through that process. You're whatever. If you fly all the time, you get the pre-screening. You don't have to go every time. Is what to me makes it make better sense, I guess.
Mr. Lacy?
How many people do you have on your team?
It's myself and Janice Wright, who's purchasing assistant. So.
All right, Dr. Langford?
All right, I think we need to take about a 7 or 8 minute break so we can, at this point, Mr. Brewer, I think we'll have to clear the room because we're going to go to safety and it's a closed session, and we'll be back at 1 o'clock for open board agenda, because we'll have lunch after that.
So the only ones who can stay in the room are board members and staff personnel. Right. So if you're not, we bid you adieu.
Older schools that require this. So our plumbers are hands-on and involved in so many other things than just what you would think of typical maintenance. Our electrical crews are not just changing light bulbs or ballast on lights, but we're running brand new electrical lines, or we're finding services and rededicating these services and pulling lines to power new equipment. One of the things that we're currently looking at is Gallatin High School, hopefully to put air and heat in the small gym at Gallatin High School. I think you folks will probably see that tonight on your agenda. Well, in order to do that, we've got to service that power, which means we've got to go and find that power and repurpose it and get it run for these units. But these are things that our electrical crews are working on, not to mention high areas with our parking lot lights, some of our stadium lights, trying to get those rerun or worked over so that they work correctly. Our grounds and roofing crew, we've got certified roofers that are on these buildings trying to find and identify any spots that are bad. Grounds crews that are taking out trees that are touching the buildings or moving dirt. Those of you that are familiar with Hawkins Hawkins Middle School, we have been out there with this particular crew servicing a retainage pond and taking the engineer's specs and reports and bringing this up to speed. so that it's beneficial not only to the school but to the folks that are there that live beside it. We've got a heating and air crew that I would love to have more people on, but right now I haven't been able to find anybody for that. But our heating and air crew, I think you guys are probably familiar with, because nobody wants to get hot and nobody wants to be cold. So these guys are out there all certified, working on commercial units themselves. We can put them in or we can service them, but it just depends on how much time that we have and what the workload is like. And then of course we've got a carpentry and cabinetry crew that you'll see some pictures of later to see what our carpentry crew can do. Along with that is also our masons, custom cabinetry. We've got a shop at our office to where one gentleman and a helper can build any type of furniture or custom cabinetry that you could possibly use in your school, and it's second to none. We're so fortunate to have them and the ability to do that. But it's just one man. He does a great job. You should see it. And then, of course, we've taken on several years ago our lawn care. We used to contract that out, but now we've got our own department of gentlemen that do that at all the schools. And I think that you might have noticed that all of our lawns look so much better than they used to in years past. So we've got a crew that does that and services it, a department. They service all the mowers. They do all the mowing. They'll bring back some trees to make it look better. I've got some out right now doing nothing but blowing leaves and getting them out of our parking lots to keep them where they look nice. Responsibilities. We've got 52 schools that range in age from 75 years old to 1 year old. 6 support buildings, 1 middle college building in Portland. We've got multiple sports buildings, so many it's hard to count. But when we calculate it, we're looking at about 6.4 million square feet that are under roof. And if you exclude Liberty Creek, our average age is about 40 years. So needless to say, we've got our hands full, but we appreciate the job security, so thank you with that. But one thing that I wanted to point out to you folks and give you a good idea of is how do we manage that volume? And I think that people probably wonder about that. How do we take what's coming in, or how do we know what's happening, and how do we manage that, and how do we track it? Well, we've got to team up with the school administration, the principals, the vice principals, and their designees to help us know what's going on at each school. We enlist some of our support staff, our custodians. Will let us know. They'll either let the administrators know, or we'll give them access to the computer program if the principal sees fit, so that they can enter that in. Of course, then from that point, once we obtain that, we have to prioritize it, we have to track it, and then of course the key is communication. We've got to communicate with this system so that our principals will know exactly what's happening in their buildings. Prioritizing and tracking. Now, how do we do that? I gave you a picture on the side for School Dude. I always thought it was an interesting name when I came, and we've looked at several other programs since I've been here, but I always default back to School Dude because it seems to be the one that's got the biggest majority share of all this. They've got the biggest handle on this. They know how to work it. And so we go back to School Dude, but all of our work orders come into School Dude. We've got start to finish visibility, and that visibility is not just with us, but is with the principals and the administration as well. If I need to go back and look at historical data, I can. I can pull those reports and I can print that up to see what we've experienced in the past. Principals or administrators, when they put this in, they can prioritize it when they give it to us by an emergency, which will give me a little red flashing light, high, medium, or low. They set the priority on this. Everything requires a work order. The first thing that we're going to tell you is if you call me on the phone and say, I've got a problem at my school, can you help me? My answer is, of course, we'll help you. I'll get on it right now. But while I'm doing that, can you please put in a work order so that we can track this? So we always force that work order. Unfortunately, with that, though, we've got duplicates. I may have something that comes in and they will put it in 15 more times when they probably could have just asked us a question or sent me an email. So we've got to go through there and clear those up. We've also got to factor that in when we run our reports, that a lot of times there's duplicates on that. But school administrators initiate all of the work orders. Now, I went ahead and printed you up a work order sample. I put it on here so you can see it. We're going to go through that. But the first thing I put on here, this was put in this past Saturday. I pulled this up. I was working on the presentation on Saturday, and I thought, well, how appropriate. This one came in that very day. It came in on the 11th of this month. That's a work order that we received. That work order is from Jamie Warren, the principal at Walton Ferry. This is exactly what we get. Priority level. She marked this as a medium priority level. Okay? So we're going to take this, folks, from there, and we're going to take it and we're going to try to decide exactly how we're going to handle it and what we've got in front of that could be possibly more important. And you can see on her notes, it says, I would like the cabinets in the old front office that are hanging on the wall removed if possible. I will need to utilize the space for a TV display in the new conference area. Priority medium. Very nice note. We'll take that. I'll assign that to our cabinetry and carpentry crew. And then we'll decide from that point when we want to start that job. What's in front of it that's more important? Because these guys could be pouring concrete for a new greenhouse. They could be repairing a wall. They could be doing some masonry work. They could have a set of cabinets that are fixing to go into an elementary school of cubbies that we built. They could be building a changing table for CDC at that point in time. We're going to finish those up, and then we're going to go out there and we're going to take these cabinets down for unless it's something that would cause a bigger issue. This is just an example of that. But with that, as I went through and gave you guys kind of a rundown on what we do, I thought I'd go ahead and show you some things that were already done, some things that were handled during the summer, some different projects that we either contracted or we did ourselves. So Indian Lake. Indian Lake, we went in and took all the classrooms that had old tile in it. We had an asbestos removal on all of them, and we have completely replaced all of the tile, all the VCT in Indian Lake. That is completely done. The PTO is ecstatic. While we did that, didn't think it was fair to just do Indian Lake. Howard Elementary had the exact same issue. So we took care of Howard Elementary this past summer, the entire school. There is their cafeteria. Walton Ferry, in the exact same boat. We did a renovation, but we didn't catch the classrooms. So we made sure that we did all 3 schools this summer to make sure that they all got exactly what they were looking for. So Walton Ferry, there's their brand new floor. Okay? All of it had to have asbestos removal done while the kids were out. Millersville Elementary. Little Millersville doesn't ask for much, so we try to help them any way we can. They were able to get a new car rider canopy this summer, which they are super excited about. In years past, they've picked up things like Catherine playground units all through their playground. It's really renovated it. They enjoy it. Oakmont Elementary. Oakmont Elementary got one of our brand new greenhouses. And if you haven't seen these greenhouses, we've got them at several schools. These greenhouses are equally as nice as the ones that go into the high schools, except they're shrunk down. Super, super nice. At the same time, Portland West ended up getting one. My guys go in. We didn't put the greenhouse up, but we go in on all these greenhouses and we scrape the ground. We pour the concrete pad. We run them the power, everything that's needed, water to the greenhouse. All of that is put in for them, and then they pay and have a propane tank set. Rucker Stewart. Rucker Stewart, we went through and contracted out to have all the hallways painted. We've gone through there. You can see on this, that's all brand new paint at Rucker Stewart to kind of revitalize that and lift it up. Ellis Middle School. If I didn't tell you, you may not have an opportunity to look, but Ellis we were able to go through and take all of your fascia, all of the forward-facing metal, all of your doors, everything that you see, and we went through and had that contracted and painted, all of that on the outside of the building, and you could see it right here on the side to give it a facelift. It was all old, it needed that. Watt Hardison, we've gone through, which we've done in a bunch of different schools. We've gone through this school and we've epoxied the bathroom floors. We've gotten rid of some old sheet good vinyl that they would lay down in schools years ago that would start to curl up on the edges, especially in the boys' restrooms. We peeled all that up, scraped it, and got the epoxy put down. And I mean, they love it. The custodians think it's the best thing ever. Schaefer Middle School, we did the same thing in there. We always try to get some of these throughout the county. Hawkins Middle School, that's Hawkins Library. We pulled everything out of Hawkins Library. We put in brand new LED lights, and we put down a Kinetics floor. Kinetics floor is the latest thing that I've been putting in schools. We love it. It's 100% recycled water bottles, that carpet is. It cleans up like none other. You spill whatever you want to on it, and there's almost a guarantee that we can get it out. I don't know that we found anything that we can't get out of that floor. And the herringbone design that they did looks wonderful. There's a picture of it with all the furniture back in. They were so excited. Westmoreland Middle, we had to put new flooring in the band room at Westmoreland. That's Kinetics as well. That's going to last forever, almost. It's going to last, folks, until it's not going to matter to me anymore. How about that? Guild Elementary. We put another floor down at Guild Elementary in that library. And that is Kinetics as well. Station Camp Middle, we put down LVT, vinyl plank flooring in their office and kind of stepped it up a notch. It looks really good. White House High School, if you haven't seen the new gymnasium floor, there's a good example of it. Now, also with that, we couldn't put down a brand new gymnasium floor with the school without coming back and going ahead and painting to go with that. You know, you do some things and it highlights others. I guarantee you, I put LED lights in a school, I'm going to be painting it shortly after because it's going to show everything on the walls. So there's White House High. T.W. Hunter. You may not have known it, but I've been working on it for the past several years. T.W. Hunter had fogged up windows and doors. You may have seen it at T.W., you may not. And what happens is these are thermal pane windows. And so the gas seal, that argon gas in between the two panes, that seal is broken and it allows that gas to escape, and those windows fog up and you can't see through them. So this year we were able to get every single door and most of the windows to finish it up. That's just a good example of what it looks like. R.T. Fisher. R.T. Fisher got a brand new secured vestibule when you come in. That opened it up. It made it to where people can wait out there before they buzz them into the school, just like every other school. Gallatin High School Stadium. I'm sure that's top of mind to everyone. But what you probably don't know is the only thing you see in this picture that an outside firm did was actually physically put the bleachers up. We scraped the ground. We poured the concrete. We dug the holes. We set it up according to the engineer's plan. And my guys built that concession and bathroom from the ground up. So we laid the block, we poured the concrete, we wired it, we put in the heating and air. Everything was done by our guys. There's you another good example of it right there. Now, it took a lot of man hours and a lot of time, but that's the skill that we have. I don't know what I would do without them. Portland High School, baseball. That is a brand new dugout on the home side and press box, 100% by Sumner County Maintenance. We took it from ground to roof. We built the whole thing. We also, at that point in time, with some money that I had through insurance, took and instead of just doing partial, I was able to recover the entire baseball building. We reskinned the whole building, walls and ceiling, with metal. Hendersonville High School. There's your concession stand beside the football field. We were able to get those shingles off and go back with a brand new metal roof, change the whole appearance of the building. Beach Elementary, all of your kindergarten classrooms this past summer, we were able to strip those and go back and put in brand new carpet flooring for them. Nanny Berry. This was the last thing I had on here. The guys, we had this is what you don't hear about. Every school has a grease trap. You can see that hole, the brick laid hole over on the side. This is where grease comes through the pipes from the cafeteria. It collects in there and we get it pumped out. Well, this one had failed. And the ladies were just slowly letting the water drain out, never complaining. And we got an opportunity where we dug that up and fixed what you can see on this cross section of a pipe right here. That's years and years that collected in there. I won't go into detail about the smell, but you can only imagine. But our guys fixed all that in-house. If you want to run by and see, I'm sure the dirt's still fresh. It's right beside the white loading dock on the back of the building. You can see it right there. But that's one of the things that we do. That's what plumbers do. They dug that hole, they cross-sectioned it, they replaced it, they covered it back up. We're just more than than additional toilet. That's everything I've got on my presentation for you folks, but I just want to kind of give you a good idea of what we do.
Mr. Lancaster.
Obviously, appreciate what you do. I don't know how many times I've forwarded requests, concerns, Facebook posts, or whatever to you, and you're always quick to respond and say, "Hey, I'm on my way right now," or whatever. So I do appreciate that. I guess what I didn't see in here, how many people do you have on your staff, like countywide?
I think last time that I counted, I had 67 positions. That doesn't mean I have 67 people, but I do have those positions, so I've got quite a few openings.
Do you, I guess, I would assume that we do a lot more probably in the summer and times when kids aren't in the building. Do you hire temp help during the summertime to kind of, assist those at all, or is that something we've ever looked at doing, budgeting to, kind of, any of these big, like, for example, I know we got all these football concessions and things like that, some of that y'all are, I don't know if y'all are doing all of it or what, but.
I've researched temporary help in the past when we first took on lawn care and found out that it was not financially responsible or beneficial. It was better for us to have our own guys. But in the summertime, if we're fortunate, if we're good stewards of the money that's allotted to us, we always trying to find a way to spend that on the schools, and you saw a lot of those projects that we spent it on. Matter of fact, by the time I'm done, everything is usually extinguished and it's all gone into the schools. And the principals know that because I go over their budget request and I go back and I tell them what we've got and what we're going to do. Sometimes we will bring in outside help, and that will be for large paint projects, or it'll be for large flooring projects that we'll do. So yes, we'll bring them in like that. Never on the temporary help. Where we get the biggest infusion of help is right now. All of my mowers that we've been fortunate enough to get, as soon as I call the mowing for the season, they are in the departments right now. So plumbing got 2 extra help to put in bottle fillers. Electricians are getting some help to try to kill some of these work orders that we've got for additional plugs. Electronics got some additional help. Grounds and roofing got 2 people. So we are spreading them out, and they're going and taking care of projects, and we're trying to knock as much in the head right now as we can before that grass starts to grow. And when it starts to grow, I'm going to let it grow for a little bit until I go, man, we need to cut it now because I'm getting so much done right now.
Mr. Lancaster. All right. Oh,
How many open positions do you have?
I'd have to go back and look. I can't tell you exactly, but I've got open positions in HVAC and electric. I'd have to go back and look and see.
I think, we tried bidding, for instance, lawn care for 5, 6, 7 years, and what we found out is you either paid astronomical sums to get it done correctly, or you got companies that didn't show up for 2 or 3 weeks at a time because they couldn't find help. So they've done a tremendous job with the quality of the lawn care, in addition to all the other maintenance. So if you have a chance, if you haven't been over to the Rigsby building, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to Andy and do a tour just to see. It's really pretty remarkable, the operations that we have there, the equipment that we have. In fact, I know we had our new bucket truck out looking at Hendersonville the other day. So the bucket truck that we approved a few weeks ago is operational and already being put to use for maintenance.
Oh, yeah.
Ms. Hawkins?
I want to thank you so much because maintenance is so important. My question for you is there anything we can do? Is there something you need that you want to let us know about?
No, ma'am. I appreciate it. We always laugh and say thank you for the job security whenever somebody calls us with a problem. So I think everybody appreciates that. We appreciate the work that we get and the support. We appreciate it when you guys approve our budgets because I can promise you we use every last cent of it, and every bit of it goes to the school. If you don't believe it, ask your principals, and they'll tell you there's nothing that we waste.
I think another thing is this summer, for instance, this was even prior to the stadium collapse at Beach, but I know talking in July to Andy about the need to prioritize big capital purchases, he immediately, within a week had a list. We've got to do the roof at Portland. We've got to do the roof at Station Camp. We need to do the lighting at Station Camp. We need to do, he had a number of big projects that we could immediately take action on that were definitely necessary.
Ms. Andrews?
Yeah, I just want to say, and I brag on y'all all the time. I feel like, when you talk about tax dollars and us utilizing tax dollars and being good stewards of taxpayer money, I can't think of really anything better than our maintenance department because we are able to do so much in-house, quickly, efficiently, effectively. Y'all do a great job. I'm kind of disappointed you didn't have any of the cabinetry stuff, pictures on there because it's gorgeous. He does a fantastic job. I know he did the trophy case at Beach High School for them, and even put some lights and so forth in there, and it looks fantastic. I mean, it really is pretty. Speaking of needing electrical HVAC, I know those are two programs that are specifically offered at Portland at the Middle Technical College. Have we done any partnerships with them, or do we have any where their graduates then are maybe able to either intern with us or look to hire after graduation?
So I've got a relationship with Nathan Jarrett, the president of TCAT. TCAT right now currently only does HVAC in Nashville off of White Bridge Road. They also do a little bit of electric down there. Now they may offer electric at Portland. They offer internships, and I've asked about a partnership with that. The only issue is we've got such competition with other companies that are trying their best to grab those folks right then when they come out. It's very appealing to the kids that are coming out. I've got two boys. I've got one in TCAT right now off White Bridge Road with HVAC, and I've got another who is more successful now at 21 than I was until I was 45. And he's HVAC, and he got it off from TCAT, and he's knocking it out of the park.
Yeah, that's true. So I guess maybe then on the reverse, we could have some of these companies of people who are ready to retire, but maybe not fully retire. Looked at some of that. I know my husband went through, I think it's NJAETC, something like that. I don't always get those right, but it's the Journeyman Electrical, and it is over off, I think, Bessler's Lane. So I don't know if you have a relationship with them or not, but it would maybe be another apprenticeship type program company that we could look into. Obviously, those, it is hard to grab those because the growth in Nashville, commercial development, they're obviously able to pay more than we are and so forth.
Sure.
And that's appealing. It's very appealing to specifically younger kids. Everybody, but they only see dollar signs. So, but I just want to say thank you for the work that you do, and keep it up. Let us know if you need anything.
Thank you.
Mr. Gregory?
Your outside visibility says a lot for the maintenance department. And lawn care has been A+. every school I go by, the lawn care has been super. And a lot of people see that do not see, the inside. But I have not heard one complaint about
Good, thank you.
the lawn
Thank you.
care system into that project.
You know, I'm glad you said that. It's always something that's very tangible. You can see it. You can reach out and touch it if you want to. And it gives us good publicity with people if we do a good job, and we appreciate it. But one thing that you don't see is, but you notice it when it's not there, is like our electricians. You know, they always say nobody says anything to us because nobody notices the electricians until the electricity goes out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and
I sit outside.
and I appreciate it. And they do a great job, and I appreciate that. We're happy that you noticed.
Mr. Lacy?
I was just gonna ask you, like, on some of the roofs that are leaking, I know Westmoreland High School has a leaky roof. Do they do work orders on those? I know that's probably more of a harder fix. I mean, I guess, how do you address those?
They do work orders on those, and then we go to the particular area and we try to locate it. And oftentimes we're very successful, and sometimes we're not. When you get up on these roofs, there's all different types of roofs. So we might encounter a metal roof, we might encounter a rubber EPDM roof, we might encounter some areas that are actually an asphalt built-up roof or a torch down. You never know what you're going to see. So for your one in particular, we go up there and look at that. We try to find the leak if we can, but the leak may be 50 to 100 feet away from where it's actually showing inside the school. So a lot of times it's trial and error, but we just stay on it till we find it. But I can assure you, if we called anybody else in to do that, the cost of that is astronomical, because the first thing they're going to say is, let's just replace this whole side.
All right, thank you, Ms. Brown. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Hayes.
Thank you, Chairman Brewer. Mr. Brown, thank you for your leadership in the maintenance area. When you stepped into the scene, knowing some of the folks that worked in your department, you really did a great job and are doing a great job building team.
Thank you.
Your employees underneath you, they respect you. You care about them. And I know personally some of them that you care about them in their lives. It's really like a family. And to Ms. Hawkins' point, her question, what can we do to support you? The attracting employees in your department, are we addressing, is this something that we're discussing as far as compensation for maintenance employees to be able to fully staff the needs of how many square feet you first presented in all of our buildings? Is that a conservative number of employees that you have right now, or would you like to have more? Of course, we'd like to have more and pay more. Are you working toward addressing the compensation as part of your budget?
The amount of people we have is a conservative number. We're fortunate to have what we have. Other school districts are extremely envious when they come over and oftentimes call on us for guidance or help, in which I give to them every chance I get, even if they send someone over to train. So we're fortunate on that. But this is a conversation, to answer your question, that we have every week and on a daily basis. I think Dr. Langford could probably speak on that probably a little bit better, but that is on the forefront of everything we're talking about right now.
Good. Well, I know your guys go over and above to get the work done. That water main break between Harrisville High School and Ellis, those guys were in water up to their neck, if not submerged.
That's
to
right.
Try to get to the bottom, literally, of that problem and find that main break. So I just appreciate everything that each one of them do.
Thank you.
In your leadership. Thank you.
Yeah, and Ms. Hayes, to your question, we are looking long-term at what we do for compensation. I mean, obviously, we're not going to be able, like with HVAC, we're not going to be able to match what commercial HVAC companies are paying. But trying to put together the right compensation and benefits, and then, you know, the people that we have, taking care of them and retaining them, and then investing in their development also.
Most of the employees in the maintenance department, do they work other? I knew Kevin who worked on the air conditionings and heating. He had his own company, but worked for you all. I mean, he kind of did. He was getting out of his own company a little bit, but worked for the school system. So how many of your employees have other jobs?
It's probably about half and half. There are some that I know when they take an annual leave day that they're not going to the beach. They're taking that annual leave day and they're finishing up a framing project or a big roofing project or whatnot. So that's where they make their additional money.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Back to you. All right, Ms. Dam with special ed.
Well, I went back to see when was the last time I did this kind of a presentation. It was actually 10 years ago that I did an overview of special ed for the county, so I think this was a little bit overdue. There we go. All right, I'm going to start with just the basics of what special ed is. I think most of you realize there was a federal law, civil rights law, passed in 72 that created the Individuals with Disability Education Act, and we serve kids ages 3 to 21. Sometimes people don't realize we go that young and we go that old. 21 unless they earn a regular ed diploma. Forgot to do that. Sure. Well, yeah. So paramount to the law is that kids are entitled to a free, appropriate education in the least restrictive environment, and students who receive special ed not only meet at some criteria that is set by the state or the federal government, but they also have to have the need for specialized instruction. So you can have a disability, you can have a qualifying disability and still not have the need for an IEP. So who are these kids that we're working with? This is a list that I pulled up our census just the other day. So you see all the categories of kids that we're serving. And we have two additional categories, the two asterisks, the intellectually gifted and functionally delayed. Those are state categories. So the state of Tennessee, the federal government gave us broad categories and said you must, but if you want to go more, you can. So in the state of Tennessee, they did more by adding those two categories. Like I think in Michigan, the way they did more is they serve kids until they're 28. I'm glad we're not doing that. I'm doing good to cover what I have. What I think is interesting, so go ahead and click it one more time. So when I did the math on it, that's about 15.5% of our total student body have an IEP. So that's a lot of kids. Mm-hmm. That does not include, I took out the pre-K kids on that.
Does that go up or down? I guess as the years went by, is that percentage went up or down?
Yeah, well, it varies. There was a point where it was around 17%. Some of the categories changed, the criteria changed, so we fluctuated down into, 14.5%. And now it seems like we're a little bit on the rise again. So, you can compare it on the state report card when they get it updated, you can see county by county and kind of compare where we are. We've got counties that are higher, we've got counties that are lower. When I looked at those, I thought, hey, what does that look like? How did this change over time from 10 years ago? So in the federal categories, I didn't do the two state categories, but I did the federal categories just to see where's the movement been? Where have we changed over time? And one of the biggest changes you're going to see there is in the category called developmental disability. And that is a category that is good up until a student is 10 years old. So this really catches younger students, younger kids. Most of our preschool kids will start out with developmental disability. And it's a category that you either have one area of a significant delay. It might be cognitive, it could be communication, it could be social, emotional, a large deficit, or you could have two areas of a smaller deficit. So developmental delay, you can see obviously we are getting a lot more kids, which, you know, all of the changes I think also reflect what we've all lived through with COVID and the experiences that the kids lacked and the changes. I've been waiting for research to come out to definitively describe what has happened to kids. The most pertinent one I read recently was about speech language evaluations. While the same number of kids have been tested, what's changed is the percent of kids who qualify as a disability in that category. So we are seeing those changes. It's reflected in developmental delay, the intellectual disability, that those are always students that require a lot of services. That multiple disabilities, that's when a student may have a health impairment and a cognitive intellectual disability, and they're speech impaired, and they've got a vision impairment. So it's a child that has many different disabilities, and not one of them is the appropriate category. So it's like all of the disabilities impact that child.
Ms. Tam, could you take a question from Ms. Hayes?
Yes.
Yeah, Norma, my friend Norma. Ms. Tam, back to the developmental disability and that number. What, I know you made reference to COVID, but what measures or measurements are used to identify this developmental disability, which encompasses all the things that you said that they're looking for in the delay?
Right. So there would be an assessment, and there would be observations, and the assessments are done by a school psychologist.
The psychologist does them.
Yes, they do that, and then they have different areas that they have to assess, and they are physical, meaning fine and gross motor, cognitive, ability to think, communication, social emotional, adaptive, being able to take care of yourself. So those are the areas that they test. So they do that through individual assessment with the students. They go out and observe the children in an environment. There's rating scales that a parent or a preschool teacher may fill out. So they collect all that information. So the state has very specific guidelines about which tests we can give, all the different, So it is a standardized,
just one. Pardon? You use one assessment that the state.
No,
these
not
are multiple.
one. No, for any disability category, you have to give more than one assessment, and you have to have more than one person involved in that assessment. So we might be collecting observations. We may be going ourselves and doing observations. We may collect rating scales. So you gather all the information to see if the student, number one, meets that criteria for that disability, and then do they have the need for the assessment, need for the services.
Thank you, Norma.
Yeah, that one took me back when I went and did the trends. We've had an increase in, like I said, multiple disabilities, and then autism, which we all know, but we have significantly increased there as well. Again, these are disabilities that are needing a lot of care. They need a lot of services.
That's a broad spectrum on the autism.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So have they just refined the testing to identify children?
Yes, they have more people recognize it. So they understand, oh, this is autism. It's not an oppositional child, or we have more caregivers that realize what they're looking at when they see the behaviors in a child. Because what's different about kids with autism is it's not an intellectual disability. So that's the one thing that you can have a child with an intellectual disability who has autism. We have children who meet our criteria as being intellectually gifted and have autism. Right. So it's a very broad spectrum of students there.
Thank you.
So when we look at who's working with our kids, I thought I would give you kind of the numbers. Resource, that's kind of intervention. They are working with more mild to moderate disabilities. So you see the numbers, how many teachers I got, how many teaching assistants, and how many vacancies. In our CDC classes, they often are working with those kids with the multiple disabilities or those kids with intellectual disabilities. You see how many teaching positions I have and teaching assistant positions and how many vacancies. Our behavior classes throughout the county work with kids, of course, that are having, there are kids with our most difficulty managing their behaviors. You see I've got 15 teachers, 4 unfilled positions, and teaching assistant positions unfilled. Pre-K, special ed pre-K teachers, they're filled. I've got asterisks on those because we are about to post, once the county commission approves the new budget, that the new grant I just got. So I'm going to have a teacher and 2 assistants. So right now, just in my teaching staff, I have 55.5 unfilled positions. That's what keeps me up every night. It's our greatest challenge right now is these unfilled positions. So other programs that we work with gifted students, have a lead teacher who oversees and helps the other teachers in the middle school. We really focus in on those middle school students. They're growing and changing, and it's a good time to work with those students. So I've got 7 dedicated for the middle and high school. In the elementary schools, my intervention teachers serve the gifted kids. We have teachers who are dedicated for vision impairment. That is often a very, can require a lot of hours. And right now we happen to have some young kids. You can imagine teaching kids Braille, starting in pre-K and working their way up. So, so I've got 4 vision teachers in the deaf ed services. I've got 3 deaf ed teachers and 2 sign language interpreters. In my old presentation, I had 6 sign language interpreters I saw. You know, the advent and use of cochlear implants, you don't have as many people that purely need sign language. But I tell you, when you get a surprise one like we did this year, we had a brand new student in high school, we find out registration day, oh, and they're sign dependent, and I have to have a sign language interpreter the next week. That's tricky when that happens, but luckily we were able to do that. In addition to all those kids, we have kids that we transport every day to Tennessee School for the Blind in Hermitage. So 14 students go to Tennessee School for the Blind. 3 of those students are in a small deaf class that they have there. Then we have 1 student in West Tennessee School for the Deaf. The 2 schools for the deaf are in East and West Tennessee, and Middle Tennessee got the School for the Blind. And those are schools that the students live. You can either transport the kids there, or they are residential students, and they travel back to Middle Tennessee. The kid from West Tennessee travels back and goes back. And same thing in at the School for the Blind. They have a whole residential portion of that campus. Speech language pathologists, this is something I kind of don't want anybody to know about, because I was just with all the other special ed supervisors in the Middle Tennessee, Upper Cumberland area, and they're all hurting for speech language pathologists. So I didn't want them to know that I actually have a lot, and I'm delighted with it. Speech language pathologists, when you think about those disability categories I talked about, they work with kids who are developmentally delayed. They work with the kids that are in our CDC classes. They work a lot with our kids with autism, because autism comes out of, one of the components of autism is communication. So they have all kinds of specialty areas. They pass a national certification. They have a medical license, and they also have a Tennessee Department of Education license. So I've got 48 of those. I have 2, they call them speech language assistants, SLPAs is the category Tennessee has. They actually have a teaching degree, but they haven't gotten their C's that last year that gets them that national certification. So I've got 4 part-timers that I individually contract with, and I have 2 unfilled positions. We also use some assistants. So what do? They do the evaluations, they provide services. They provide services at Head Start locations, because we have a requirement from the state of Tennessee that we go into Head Start. They provide walk-in services that I'll be talking about a little bit more in a minute, for just kids that need to come in and have some maybe articulation or language therapies. We also have an obligation to serve the private schools that are located in Sumner County. So part of our funds we have to set aside based on the census of kids with disabilities who are attending private schools. So we actually go to those different sites. We also have a site just next door up at the Teacher Center upstairs. We have a speech language clinic, and those kids who are homeschooled, who require services and want those services, can come up there. We meet with the private schools and the homeschool parents every year. We talk about this pot of money and what do we want to spend it on. So it's we take their suggestions under advisement, and then we pick the services, and we will provide those services until that money runs out. It's not it's until the dollars are used up. What other support staff do I have? You have school psychologists, and you see I've got 24, and we have 52 schools, so they have to split schools. They are also a very hard to find position right now. I have administrative support, that'd be myself, my supervisors. I have consulting teachers, and my other administrative support. Behavior support, we have 2 board certified behavior analysts. One of them works directly for us, and one of them is on a contract, and I have our behavior support trainers, which all have their RBTs pass that license or they are getting it. I also have physical therapists and occupational therapists. Of course, those are medical license. I have 2 certified OT assistants and 10 school social workers right now. 3 unfilled positions there. So what are we doing trying to address our teacher shortages? You know, we work with and we tell everybody about what it takes to get a job embedded license. We look at any of our teaching assistants who have 4-year degrees and encourage them to look into getting a job embedded license. You can get that with a 4-year degree. You have to pass a content area exam and be enrolled in that program, and you can get a license. They take a lot of supervision. So my consulting teachers are really having to work with them because they haven't passed all their coursework yet. There's a Grow Your Own program that we've been participating with with Lipscomb, and these are people who are currently working as teaching assistants for us, and they're in a master's program to get their licensure, and we're on track to get 8 teachers out of that. They'll be ready for the fall. Last year when we did the Grow Your Own, they started with the regular ed. I told them that was really not the thing to do, but nobody listened to me. They started with the regular ed, so we got math teachers and we got science teachers out of that, but we didn't get any sped teachers, so I will get them in the fall. We do a lot of practicums. That means that we will have people, school psychologists will come and spend a year with us. For the first time, I did those as paid practicums. Anytime a speech language pathologist needs hours, they want to shadow us, any opportunity, somebody wants some hours, we try and build that relationship, whether it's with school psychologists, speech language pathologists, and social work. We take in a lot of social work interns as well. We work closely with student teachers from various schools, of course. We do contracts, and I'll tell you, it's my least favorite thing to do is to use a contract teacher. We have pretty good luck if they've worked with us, worked for us, and they, don't want to work full time. They just want to work part time and do that kind of a contract. But the agencies, the quality of those people, I've not been impressed with. So it's my least favorite. Pre-K. This is kind of like I don't know that people realize how much is going on in pre-K. So we have absorbed, we've kind of combined the voluntary pre-K with our sped pre-K and working together to build an early learning department. So voluntary pre-K was lottery funded. So that is state dollars that is given out to schools for systems that apply to them. So we've got 6, 20 students each in those programs, and we have a waiting list of 50 students who are eligible. It's based on income, so these are for at-risk kids. We just received some additional funding, so hopefully we'll be able to increase that to another. So those are 120 kids in there. The developmental pre-Ks, those are our sped pre-Ks. You see we have 164 of those kids. We also have peers in those programs. Those are the fee-based ones, but mostly teachers' kids, people who work for Sumner County Schools. We also have 98 kids who either are coming in just for that speech therapy or we're going into their private daycare. So we do some itinerant services where we go and we collaborate with the staff and help them work with the needs of that child. And the reason we do that is we want the kids in the least restrictive environment as possible with typically developing peers. So if we can work with the kids in their own private daycare situation, that works out well. That's been pretty successful. Since August, we've tested 128 kids that are between the ages of 3 and 5. So in Tennessee, there is an early intervention program working with kids 0 to 2, Tennessee Early Intervention. Sumner County has the highest participating rate in early intervention services in the state. I'm required to test those kids by the time they turn 3. So I get a list of 30 plus names every month for us to contact those families. Do you want to continue? Are you interested in services at 3? So we have to work through that process. So just 128 since August till now. And it's, we're having a hard time keeping up with that, that's for sure. So really, if you look at it, 467 kids are in our pre-K, and that's, I asked this morning, it's the equivalent of Westmoreland Elementary. It's the closest school. So that's how many kids participate in our pre-K program. So funding sources. Really wanted to point this out because it's in the news that the state of Tennessee is looking at not accepting the federal dollars. So what are the federal dollars? The top 2 lines. So $6.5 million coming to Sumner County. That for some reason the state is thinking maybe we're not going to take those dollars. Then our general purpose funds, which are a combination of state and local funds. State SPED Pre-K, that's a brand new grant. Love to have it, thank you very much. But they told me I'd be getting that about October 15th and gave us 2 weeks to have a budget. So that was a little late news, but we've been told it will be reoccurring, so I'm hoping so. So voluntary pre-K, that's lottery funded. That's the total amount that the state provides to us. They give us enough for a teacher and an assistant, some materials. My problem with the voluntary pre-K is they based it on a teacher's salary 15 years ago, and they've never increased it. So while they are sending us the money, it's very inadequate, the dollars that they're sending. We participate in Medicaid reimbursement, so those services that are medical, the OT, the PT, the speech therapy, nursing services actually, but those dollars don't come to me, Lisa keeps them. Those services for TennCare eligible kids can be reimbursed to us. So I gave you the estimate of what we received last year. And then we have the Small Duke Estate Endowment, which is a continuing endowment that it was before my time, so it's got to be 40 years ago that a family gave us that endowment to memorialize their child who had come through Sumner County Schools, and we have to spend it on daily living skills for students. So we usually use it in our CDC programs. Another area that's in the federal laws that we have to talk with kids starting at 14 about what their plans are for the future. You can imagine it's an interesting conversation at 14. Most people are playing basketball, or they're rap singers, or they've got some wild ideas at 14, and we work to narrow that down and see what's doable in their lives. So we do transition services. We work with Voc Rehab. Voc Rehab actually comes into our high schools, and they have job clubs, and they teach job skills. We have agency fairs. One of the most interesting things we do is this work-based learning. So we've got 58 students that we take out to job sites every day. We train them on how to do the job, then we take them out, we supervise them, bring them back. So these are some of the bus drivers, Andrew's bus drivers, that work an additional 17 hours as trainers, and they take the kids out to the job sites. So the next slide shows you who our community partners are right now, that we have kids out in these sites practicing their job skills with the hope for paid employment at some point in their lives. And the last thing I'd like to, if you all don't know about Project Search at Welch College, it's a fabulous partnership we've had. It is a partnership between many agencies. Welch College, Sumner County Schools, we provide a teacher. One of the agencies provides an assistant. One of them provides the curriculum. One of them works on job placement. This was a project that started at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and there are 17 different locations, 17 different counties that have formed one of these partnerships. A lot of them are hospitals, some of them are hotel chains. And what those kids do that go to Welch is they get job opportunities in many different fields. Food services, the office, clerical, groundskeeping, custodial. So they get job opportunities and they get to see what it's like while we're training them how to have, how to interact appropriately, how to handle different things. So we're working on their soft skills to be able to leave us. We've won an award because most of our kids go to paid employment when they leave us. We've had a high percentage of our kids that go on to paid employment. So it does serve the whole Mid-Cumberland area. So while there has been participants from Robertson County, I think they've had a participant from Westmoreland. Right now, it's all our kids. So we've got 7 kids over there at Welch right now. Kids go through an extensive interview process before they pick the 7 kids. They have to go. Actually, it's a job interview, and we interview them to see who they're appropriate. And if you ever get contacted, please volunteer and say, yes, I'll be an interviewer, because they get people from the community to interview the kids. I think the biggest downfall is there's no transportation provided. So we get the benefit of it's right there at Welch, so it's a little bit easier to provide transportation when it's right here, your campus. Kind of where we're at. Questions?
Mr. Gregory?
What is the reason that our state's not going to accept that money?
I'm gonna
speak for our state legislature.
I'm going to jump in at that point, Mr. Gregory. I'm going to save Ms. Dan from herself on this one. But Mr. Gregory, I don't know. I will say I read an article the other day. So this is from the Tennessean, so take it for what it's worth, that the committee that was studying it kind of backed up and said, we're not saying we're not going to take it. We just wanted to see what the consequences were. I believe the thinking is that, so this is just me speculating. I believe the speculation was that you could, if you didn't take the federal money, you would not be required to provide the services. But the reality is that, the Americans with Disabilities Act or other acts that would trump state law. So basically, we would be giving up the dollars, but still provide the services. One, because it's the right thing to do. That most important, it's the best thing for kids. But I think that's the. I feel like this is going to be one that's going to kind of die on the vine. The study that they got back said that they could take that money out of general funds from the state of Tennessee and give it to school districts to compensate for the lost revenue, but that would take away from other potential legislative initiatives that they're interested in. And I think, Ms. Dam hit on another point, is the problem with all of it is that the federal levels were set to support special education 20, 30 years ago, and there's been no cost of living, no adjustment for salary increases or things like that. So she has to do, or we have to do more with less each year. to try to meet the needs of our kids. At the same time, she mentioned post-pandemic, we're seeing a big uptick in needs of our kids, especially in speech language pathology and other areas. Ms. Herring can tell you the number of type 1 diabetics has skyrocketed since the pandemic. So that's kind of the need. But I don't get a strong feeling, Mr. Gregory, that there's going to be a actual rejection of 1.8 billion, I think, in federal funds.
I thought it was 2.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Lancaster. I guess what do you hear, feedback from, I know there's a lot of turnover in the special ed assistants and things like that. Is it strictly money, or is it just, what are the biggest things that you're hearing back there? I know that's a problem. It's a problem across, not just, we're not unique.
I think, that's one of the reasons we're frankly looking at compensation, I think. But I will also tell you it's difficult work. Students communicate through their behavior, and so sometimes that behavior is hard to manage. So it's hard work. It's rewarding work. When you see the incremental changes and you see children's behavior change, but we have in the past done some changes to our pay scale so that some of the more challenging, working with CDC students, working in the behavior classes, the pre-K, we have elevated their pay. So that's one strategy we've gone after. Were you asking just about the assistants?
The assistants, I guess primarily, I think looking at it, that was the biggest area where you have, and obviously the behavior, classes is just its own unique challenges. But just, I guess for lack of a better way to say it, is there things that we can do or that you need from us is kind of what I'm asking.
I think there's two big things. I think one on our side that we're going to have to be prepared to do is to look differently at the way that we address needs of our special ed children and staff in terms of staff members, and that's going to be in Mr. Ott's compensation plan that we'll share in January. The other thing is that, Ms. Dan mentioned earlier, the Grow Your Own is the federal government puts so many restrictions. Like, for instance, if we need a high school English teacher, we can go recruit a recent college grad, have them take the praxis, enroll in a master's program in the span of about 2 weeks. We can put them in a classroom and then support them to teach. We can't do that with special education. It's a much more rigorous process, and colleges of education are not producing the numbers of graduates that we need, but they're absolutely not producing the number of graduates in special education that we need. And so I think we're at the point where we're going to have to accept that colleges of education are not going to rescue us by producing special education teachers. We're going to have to figure that process out ourselves. I think compensation will help, but I think the reality that we're looking at is that there's a shortage. Williamson County is having to take on contract special education teachers that they've never done in the past. This is a national level problem that's either going to require action by Congress to change the qualifications to give us some flexibility to train our own special education teachers, or we're going to try to. I don't think that there's, and Ms. Dan, jump in here, I don't think that there's one silver bullet that's going to get there. I think it's going to be a whole bunch of different avenues we're going to have to pursue. But we're going to have to be really creative, and we're going to have to address, we're just going to have to own the fact that we're going to have to do some things differently than we've done in the past.
Mr. Graham?
Thanks, sir. Yeah, I have a 14-year-old with an IEP, and we just had the meeting with the transition language. Apparently he wants to work part-time at Starbucks.
I know. The things you didn't know.
And be a SWAT team member and a spy. So,
We'll get training on that
yeah.
right now.
So when I've talked to special education teachers, pay is always an issue with any position. But what I hear over and over again is when they don't have assistants and they don't have enough assistants, that's what makes their job all the more difficult. And I've talked to Dr. Langford about this, but then bleachers collapsed, so I think we stopped talking about it for a minute. But I know the assistants have also said that they could really utilize the iPads because they have to enter the data. And so I think it's just those little things.
Yeah.
If we just paid attention to those and tried to make their life easier.
Right, I think Ms. Hessen has been, just not, she has been working on that.
Yeah.
I heard that Ms. Hessen had identified that as well,
Yeah.
that this, it wasn't that we were, no one was thinking they shouldn't have it.
Right.
It was just an oversight, but I think we're working on that. Because there's so many of the programs now that we have all the iPads that the programs are on the iPad, and if the teaching assistant doesn't have it, it's not like before where you had access to the workbook or the teaching materials. So if it's on the iPad, then we need to get that to them.
Yeah, and if 80 or 15% of our students have an IEP, that's 85% of families and probably citizens who don't realize all the moving parts that go into special education. So I sincerely appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Ms. Andrews?
Yes, just curious, and this is not in any way to like point out, but I know that assistants obviously are a great need to have in SPED and so forth. And I know a lot of times those positions are filled, with stay-at-home moms or other people within the community because they want to be, near their kids or have the same schedule as their kids. Are there, obviously, I'm sure that there are positions across the whole district, but are there any pockets that, of the district that maybe have higher number, like, there's a, is there a great need in Westmoreland? Is there a great need in Hendersonville? Just so that we can tell people in those areas, hey, if you're looking for a job, versus, no, we don't really need anybody in Portland, but we do need somebody in White, just for commuting wise and so forth, to be able to help communicate to people who might be interested.
I don't know that there's any particular area. I mean, Indian Lake right now has 2 positions posted, 2 CDC assistant positions posted. I know that they've been looking for some at Rucker Stewart for several months.
Okay.
It's not any particular area. And we're working with identifying the ones that are working for us. We're always asking them, hey, do you have a 4-year degree? Did you realize you could get, if you're enjoying this work, we can help you if you'll get into a job embedded program. And I know I met with some folks with HR with Marla and looking at a program that might be geared just for teaching assistants.
Okay.
And some of those that don't have 4-year degrees. So we're looking at tapping into that because it's almost like, well, if the universities don't have people coming in saying, hey, I want to be a special education teacher, and if they don't have that, then we're going to have to build the interest and build the capacity from within.
Right.
So
I don't mind helping recruit and get the word out and so forth, but I didn't want to, get people's hopes up and be like, hey, we need lots of people, in a particular, area or whatever, and be like, we actually,
you find them.
May not want to drive.
You find them, we'll hire them.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
They kind of. I keep when I'm working with the principals, I'm saying you got to work your community, your PTAs, get it out on the board because that's where you're going to find somebody. And I'll also put a shout out to in HR, Debbie Knowlton, who does the background checks. She grills them and finds out their background, and if she hears that you're being a sub and you're have a spec degree, she says, no, you're going to go down there and meet them. And she personally brings, she's brought down 3 people this year. They wanted to sub, but now they're talking to us. So I know everybody's
Also,
aggressively.
just curious, because I know this year we also started at HHS allowing them to have the sign language program, which I'm hopeful that will also, in turn, as it develops, be able to build into our special education, whether it be
Right.
assistance or so forth.
That's
Has
another-
that been well received at HHS? Do we know?
I don't know if the, I don't know. It would
I'm not sure.
depend
I need to
on
check.
Okay.
if they have enough students interested in it.
Yeah.
But we do get a lot of future teachers because they were peers in those high school programs.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Dam.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Skinner.
AJ Wolf is here with us. He is going to be with us for a year. He came to Tennessee to spend some time with us for Apple support. So he's going to share how he's going to support our district.
Do you want to explain the Apple PL person like that? What we're doing?
Say that again.
Like how he's working with us, like just having the Apple PL person?
Yeah, he's going to go through all of that
Oh,
with
okay.
you.
I'm sorry.
He is.
Okay, I'll
He
be
has a
quiet.
whole
My bad.
presentation to share with y'all how that's going to look in Sumner County. We are very excited to have him here. He's been here for about 2 weeks, and I think his calendar is booked up through the middle of December already with school support. So we're excited that he's here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Agent Wolf. As Frankie was saying, I'm coming here from Reno, Nevada, so I'm relocating back out here. I actually am originally from Lewisburg, Tennessee, so I do know this area fairly well. And additionally, I did teach in the Clarkson-Montgomery County school system, so I am very familiar.
Our screens just went black.
Unfortunately, there's some technical inabilities to project directly to your screen, so the only way I'll be able to show is kind of up here. And I do apologize about that, but the reason we're doing it this way is so you can actually see some actual usage of the iPad. One of the things that was kind of talked about as it was coming in is what can Apple lend to you guys in terms of driving your students forward and helping them become successful. And so I just briefly want to kind of talk about myself. I do have an email that you guys can email. It is a Sumner County Schools email. I also have an Apple professional email. We're going to be looking at how we can empower both your faculty, your staff, and your students to really take advantage of these devices. And to that end, we actually have 4 kind of pillars that we work with. And so the 4 pillars that we are going to work with are, what are those base foundational skills that your students, faculty, and staff need to have? So a lot of your students have probably used technology, but there's a huge difference between using technology as kind of a consumption device. So consumption of content, watching YouTube videos, watching TikToks, whatever the case may be, versus actually using them to enrich your learning experience. And so we go in as a senior professional learning specialist. I would go in and I would work with faculty and staff, and sometimes even with students, and we would look at how can I take this device to the next level. So how can I use this to take high quality notes that are going to transform student understanding and student learning? How can I demonstrate and assess what my students actually know? As you all are probably fairly aware, AI has become a huge portion and a huge conversation and speaking point in education. And so as a teacher, I have to think about how I assess my students in a way that's not just going to be the traditional write me a paper or write me a response or pick the right multiple choice. And that's where the iPad really shines through, because we can have students create videos. We can have them walk through and kind of demonstrate their knowledge in a way that you can't do necessarily with paper or pencil in real time, or additionally that maybe AI can't make. I mean, it's very hard for AI to come in and make the podcast for you. Now, it could give you a script which teaches our students how to use some tools, right? How to get them prepared for those future things. Maybe it can write that script to give us a place to start off, but it also allows us to kind of build that assessment. Another big area that we push and work with is collaboration on the iPad. And collaboration goes across many, many folds. It's student-to-student collaboration, it's student-to-teacher collaboration, and it's teacher-to-teacher collaboration. And all these things are really critical as we're building out and kind of working on assessment of learning, assessment for learning, and how we can push these students to the absolute maximum. Curriculum integration is another huge piece here. And so we work side by side with teachers to pull in those specific standards that they're looking at and saying, how can we engage students in a way that's going to capture their attention? Because I know when I was in the classroom, that was a big thing. If I could give them something that they could hang their hat on that was real, that says, hey, I'm going to use this skill, because I taught math, right? And when you teach math, the question is, when am I ever going to use this? When am I ever going to actually use this? And if you can give them something to connect to, and you're going to see something like that in just a moment, if you can give them something to connect to, man, I'm telling you, you've got them. Hook, line, sinker. You've got them, and they're going to be with you for 45, 50 minutes. However long you need them to be. If it's a block class, you can get them for 90 minutes too. My absolute favorite thing, though, that I get to do with teachers is this job-embedded coaching piece. And what this is it's usually a 3 coaching cycle where we come in and we look together and we say, what is it that you're doing with students? How are you connecting to them? What are the standards you're teaching? What are your objectives? What are your goals? So we sit down that first day and we look. And then we apply a process like SAMR, which allows us to move them from being at the basic, I've never used technology, all the way up to completely changing and modifying the environment and bringing it to a totally different piece. And we come in and we say, okay, what can we do? And this is one of those things where we come in, we do that, we say, okay, let's set up this. Then we go back and they teach, and I go out and I work with them. Sometimes I'm co-teaching with them in the classroom. Sometimes I'm observing. It really depends on what the comfort level of that teacher is and what they need. And then we come back the third day because we know the thing that makes things stick with teachers is reflection. So we go back and we reflect and say, what worked well? What didn't work well? What are areas that we can improve? And hopefully we do this cycle a couple times and we transform the learning in one classroom. And what that does is it gets another teacher, oh, I'm really curious how they did that. And it builds like a wildfire. And that's what we're hoping for and trying to go for with these job-embedded coaching things. We can also do this in a model where we train teachers and then they go and do the same thing. And this is the idea. This is kind of, you've got thousands of teachers in your district and you only got one APL specialist right now. But the idea is by the time that we reach the end of my contract, the end of my time, that you'll have pockets of specialists across your buildings that can then continue to train up and work with these folks. So when I first got here, one of the first things that was asked was, what are some things that we can offer to our faculty? And so we've actually built out an entire kind of PD set of sessions for December and January that we're going to offer. So some of the sessions that we're going to offer, just basics, getting started with iPad. How do you get started? How do you get rolling with it? Because I can tell you right now, there are going to be teachers that are sitting across your classrooms that literally still have the iPad sitting on the corner of the desk because they haven't picked it up because they've got so many other things that they're trying to accomplish. So it's just getting them started, getting them comfortable with the idea of, yes, I can use this to transform maybe just one portion of my class. But then we also have deeper dives. So you have teachers out there that maybe have been using the iPad since it was invented in the late 2000s, early 2010s, right? So we have these things like visualizing mathematics, which I'm actually going to show you a portion of what visualizing mathematics looks like and what that PD session kind of goes through. Then we have things like increasing productivity, which applies to staff, students, and faculty. And then how do you go out there and reach the plethora of resources that Apple has and has brought to bear? Apple has an entire series of open educational resources, OER, called Everyone Can Create, Everyone Can Code. These are all resources that are available for free to your teachers. And they can go out and pull from these resources. And so they can work in integrating different pieces into their curriculum. So we show them how to leverage those kind of resources. But we also look at other communities out there. We have an entire Apple education community with a forum where teachers are constantly posting lessons. So there's no need for a teacher to go out to the teacher pay teacher and buy something when it's already created and being generated by our rich Apple community that already exists. So this allows them to kind of reach and access some of these things. Additionally, as we look at kind of January offerings, again, we're gonna have some repeats. Getting started with iPad, we want to try and get as many people in there. But we have things like making meaningful infographics, reaching all learners, supporting language and literacy, because this is a K-12 approach. We're going to be reaching across from elementary all the way up through high school. Just a little bit about myself. I alluded that I was a math teacher. I've actually taught 4th grade, 7th grade math, and then I taught high school. I taught engineering, robotics, coding, and AP physics. I've also taught at the higher education level coding. So I've taught through the entire K-20 space. So I'm going to be able to reach out and kind of work with your faculties. And so I wanted to quickly show how we can use Numbers, which is an Apple product that comes installed on every iPad for free, how we can use that to really enrich the curriculum. So you might find yourself in an elementary or middle school classroom where you want to talk a little bit about data. And in this particular case, we're going to be talking about population data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop out here to Numbers. And we're going to take a look really quickly at this population change. So we might provide an assignment to our students that doesn't have this data filled in with simple steps allowing them to create a bar chart. So we start with them coming in, and they're going to visit the Census Bureau to get accurate and reliable data to fill into this chart. So they can click on this, and it's going to take them out to this website link. So they're able to pull, this is Census Bureau data for the state of Tennessee through 2000. So they're going to be able to pull that through, and using something called Split View, we'll be able to have both our numbers document up and running, as well as our data chart here. So I can come in here and I can say, okay, I need to get data for 1910. So for 1910, you see I've extracted the data there. I would do 1950. I can come in here and put that in. So we have 3,291,000. We'll kind of round it off there. For 2000, we see 5,700,000. And then just because I remember, it was 6,000,000. About 900,000. So really quickly, we have our students come in. They're able to capture this data. It automatically generates a bar chart for them. By the way, we could go through the process. Depending on the grade level they're in, maybe we want them to build out that bar chart, right? But maybe we have it pre-slugged so they can come in here and do this. Because ultimately what we want them to do is they're following these instructions. They're going to come in here and they're going to annotate. And this is where using something like an Apple Pencil, and now not every school has Apple Pencils. Some of them have stylus, and they all kind of work similarly. But what they're able to do is come in here, and we can say, hey, there's a trend line here that in the state of Tennessee, the population has grown, and they could annotate this and say by a certain percentage. They could come in here and say by a certain number, but they can come in here and write all of this data in here. So we see, we went from about 2 million to 3.5 million. So we could say that's about a 1.5 million growth. They could come in here and do those annotations. Now, on top of all this, if I really want to see if these students actually understand this bar chart and reading this bar chart, I can even have them come in here and record audio. So they're able to come in and record and tell the teacher exactly the thought process behind how they did that. This is great for step-by-step processes. So like if I needed them to come in and explain the process of solving an equation, I could have them write this out and do an audio recording. I could also do screen recordings with this too, which is another great usage of this tool. Once we're done, we'll press stop here, and then we would insert this sound in here. And I know we're probably not going to get super loud sound. I don't know if y'all can adjust the sound there, but it actually is playing back, and I'll play that back. And this can be easily turned into a teacher in whatever platform the school is using. A lot of your schools are using Google Classrooms. They could very easily turn this document directly in. So this is an example of using Numbers for this kind of process. Another great example is using the camera that's built into the device. I often will sometimes hear schools say, oh, I'm going to shut down the camera because we don't want them recording fights and videotaping this and that and all the negatives that go into it. But let's talk about the positives here. So if I'm teaching students in elementary, maybe we're identifying shapes that are around us. So we can go out and snap a picture. And I can identify shapes. I can calculate angles. I can even take this up to finding the hypotenuse of this particular triangle. So we're taking it from elementary, middle, high school. So we can come in here with this particular thing. We can come in and say, okay, let's find the rhombuses. Let's find the rectangles. Let's find the parallelograms, right? Identify those things. But I can even have the students come in here and we can do something where we take a screenshot and actually annotate on this. So I absolutely love being able to do this, and I'm actually going to pull this up here. So here's a screenshot. I love coming in here and being able to take my actual ruler and taking this, and if you see, I can actually measure the exact angle of these stairs. So we can take this to a high school level problem where we say, hey, we need to make these stairs ADA compliant, we need to turn it into a ramp. And we can look at ratios, we can actually determine the length of that, and so we can actually come in here, and in my next slide, you actually will see, hey, there's the math standard that goes with this. Normally we'd use a protractor, right? Can't use a protractor on a picture that easily, but we can definitely do it with screen sharing and screen grabbing. And so we actually come in here, we have a 36-degree angle. We know that that beam is 104 inches long, and so we're able to set up a simple SOHCAHTOA problem. We're able to set up sine of 36 degrees is equal to 104 inches over the unknown hypotenuse, and we can solve that equation. And I can even have them drop in and do a screen recording walking me through the solution of that equation and explaining what the length of that area is. So this is the way that we can really transform the learning experience, and this is just across some basic examples in math. But we can do this in every curriculum area. We can do it in reading, we can do it in language, we can have students read directly from passages and run through and see where are their errors. We have them talk about comprehension, you can have them do video clips. There's so much that can be done with this. But I just briefly wanted to kind of touch on some of these things so you had an opportunity to kind of see what the iPad can do when leveraged. So I thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I'm glad to answer them.
I want to add that the apps he's referenced come on the iPad already, so this is not something we're purchasing. It's a tool that is built on the machine.
And as an APL specialist, that is one of the areas that we do work within, is we try to work within what came on the device. We do sometimes talk about additional ones, but generally those are free apps. We don't have any agenda at Apple to pressure you to purchase any additional apps or anything like that. We want you to use the device in the way that it is kind of built. That's our hope, is that you're able to use it first day rolling out off the floor.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and we've been very blessed with, just so you understand, AJ, thank you, first of all. Appreciate all that you being with us. But I think if you contract out, the problem that you always run into in our field is we have such scale with 30,000 students and 2,300 teachers, 4,500 employees. If you talk about trying to work with Apple to hire somebody in to come in and to do big trainings, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars for one-off trainings. To be able to have AJ to be here with us for a year, to not just bring his expertise, but to build up. Gene, you have how many instructional or IT coaches? 73 IT coaches that he can work with to build their capacity, along with experts in each building. It's really pretty remarkable. It's a great process.
Again, I appreciate your time and willingness to let me come speak today.
Mr. Lancaster.
I don't know who exactly this question is for, but it's something after the study session I was wondering. So one of our goals that was mentioned in the state goal.
PISA.
Yeah, there you go. Was improvement of our ACT score, I believe. Is there any, do we already have any kind of iPad app that our high school students can use that will be like a ACT prep type thing, or? Is there
I
anything
need to
like that
check to see if we have, I mean, I'm sure there is. You know, we have some ACT supports that we have for our schools. I don't know if that's app driven or not. You know, of course, the number one thing that, it's one of those things that nobody likes to hear. The best way to get ready for the ACT is coursework and getting ready for it. But the test prep is also very helpful. So it's definitely something that we can look into to see if there's some
Well, I mean,
solutions. for that.
I just know there's, I don't disagree with the coursework part of it. It's just there's, you know, there's specific math that is, you know, just a refresher type
Right.
thing. Like,
No, I 100% agree. And I think one of the things, I think we'll see a couple of things. I think one of the most fascinating things about the ACT test this year is this is the first time it's been given online exclusively. So it's going to be really interesting. You know, we just ran our seniors. It'll be really interesting to see where their scores come in. Because typically when you introduce a new testing format, you see a little bit of a dip in scores as kids adjust to that medium. I think the question is going to be, I think one of the advantages that we will have is our kids will be using their device that they're used to each day. And I think one of the advantages with the iPad is it's more tactile, like the way kids maneuver devices now. You touch it and you move the passage up. You don't use a Chromebook to scroll up and down. So I think that there will be some advantages. But I agree with, you know, some kind of rapid fire review, quiz questions, ACT style questions, time constraints, rapid scoring, and getting feedback from that. I think all those things would be really helpful.
yeah, I just, like, growing up, you know, you could go to a test prep workshop, and I know we have some, you know, some of that, but if that would be something that is more readily available, that all kids can access it, depending on scheduling and everything else.
I believe that we actually have an Ingenuity course for ACT prep that we can use also.
Ms. Andrews?
Do we know when the ACT is fully going online? I know I signed my kids up outside of Sumner County for the December, and they had the option. They asked them if they want to do it. And so pencil paper was still an option for that, but I do know that they're in the process of weeding that out. So do we know?
It's no longer an option for like the broad scale, like the ones that the state pays for.
Okay.
So that's got to be online. I would guess that the AC, I mean, we have no control over the ACT, but I would guess that they're going to phase that out.
So for our district completely, it is.
State of Tennessee's online.
It's completely, okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Graham?
I can give you immediate feedback on the ACT being taken on an iPad. The score went up, of course.
Okay.
Coursework, and we actually did Huntington as well, you know, to hedge the bet.
Yeah.
But the drawback was, since there was no booklet, there wasn't the additional amount of paper to work equations or to make notes. And so my immediate feedback is when we provide the test on the ACT, we provide a lot of paper or allow them to bring a lot of, I think we provided though, for all the scratching.
Which we should have had that anyway.
Well, the feedback I got, it was a half sheet of paper.
Gotcha.
And so when you have the booklet, you can write all in the booklet, right? And make your notes and make your annotations, make your equations.
Unless there's some kind of weird ACT rule on which you can have that, paper shouldn't be an issue.
Like I said, that's just my feedback.
Yeah.
So my presentation is as exciting as an iPad and all the things that Apple can do. One of our favorite topics, third grade retention. So we're going to go through what's new, what we know about fourth grade, and then take your questions about that, and then have some curriculum update guides. And that you all approve the high school curriculum guide every year, but there's a couple things that are going to be new in there. And then some logistic things that we've done with iPads that we want to celebrate with you all. So we'll dig in with third grade retention. This is 2022-23 in review. This is the state of Tennessee. So a little over or almost 75,000 students were tested. 29,349 met or exceeded expectations. So that left 44,495 students that had to promote to fourth grade through a pathway, which was summer scholars or tutoring or a combination or an exemption of some kind. So that was unique to our district, but other districts did that as well. And then as a state, we were retained 198 third graders. Here's the district. We promoted 928 kids to fourth grade. With the tutoring requirement, that was 151 additional kids that got to go to fourth grade, and then we only retained 9 students. This is communication that you've seen before. This is what we shared with families last year when the third grade retention law was becoming prevalent. So they've already had this communication piece this year. Nothing has changed on this first piece of communication. The next picture is a second piece of communication, and what's different about it is that box on the bottom where it says your child's scores approaching, your child scores below. That's going to be in a bigger picture in just a minute so you can actually see those words and what they mean, but I wanted you to see that the second piece of communication that's going to come out to families, third grade families, looks different in this way. It has this added additional information, which I'll share with you in more detail in just a minute. You've also seen this graph. So this is the pathway to fourth grade. The only thing that's changed, my understanding, Jean, you correct me if I'm wrong, is they added the adequate growth measure. So if you score in the below or approaching range, you attend summer scholars 90%, you do the tutoring. If you don't make adequate growth, that's going to be a challenge. The way they figure that is really complicated, and I'm happy to talk through that. And at the end of this, I didn't put the slide up here for it because I'm not sure that I've wrapped my head all the way around it, but it has to do with TVOS projections, and it's calculated student by student. So the additional layer here is that they have to make the adequate growth piece as well. All right, so everybody loves a flow chart. So this is third grade. If I'm a third grader and I scored a 1 on my TCAP, if I do not take the retest, which every third grader will have the opportunity to retest, if they opt to not retest, then they're automatically retained. That's on the right side of the first chart. On the left-hand side, if they don't take it and they go to summer scholars, they attend 90%. That means last year, if you recall, they could miss 3 days, and we give those optional makeup days for students to make if they were going to miss beyond the 3 days. So they have to attend 90% either during the program or for those makeup days, and show adequate growth and participate in tutoring. So that's a 1. So if they don't retest, they have to go to summer scholars, attend 90%, show adequate growth, and do tutoring to be promoted to fourth grade. If they do retest for TCAP, that's on the right side, and they score proficient, which is the next layer, then they're automatically get to go to fourth grade and they don't have to do any of those things. This is in their benefit to retake the test. If they retest and they don't score proficient, so their score remains the same or unfortunately drops even lower, these are their options. Summer scholars, 90% attendance, adequate growth, tutoring in the fourth grade. If that doesn't happen, there's retention. If it does happen, they go to fourth grade. I'll let you digest that for a second, see if you have any questions.
Mr. Lancaster?
I don't, maybe you addressed this earlier. What is adequate growth defined as?
So adequate growth, typically it's 3 to 5% percentage gains, but they are dissecting this student by student. So they're taking a student's 50th percentile is the mark, which we'll get into in just a second, but they're taking that 50th percentile, they're subtracting their projected proficiency rate. So I'm going to pretend that I have a student that's 48% projected by this formula from TVOS to score proficient. You take the 50th percentile, subtract the 48th projection, and then divide that by 8, and it gives you their adequate growth measure.
So
Jean and her team have done really good work in doing this for our principals and their leaders for all of our third grade students, so they don't have to dig in and do that. So it's the adequate growth measure is unique to the individual.
So I understand you get your baseline from from actually taking the TCAP. What do you get the second measure? Do you take the TCAP again at the end, or the ELA portion of the TCAP at the end, or is there a separate testing component?
The retest is part of that, so they can retest and take the TCAP, and then Summer Scholars also has a measure that they can take at the end of the program.
I guess that's my question. What is that measure?
So this is what if you can figure this calculation out, you can be Commissioner of Education. So
It's true.
so they're taking it. So they're taking their third grade score. Well, I guess this would be for. What's that? Good.
There's two adequate growth measures.
I'm sorry.
So the third grade students currently, if they're in summer school, they would have to make adequate growth from their post-test TCAP. TCAP would be actually their pre-test to the end of summer school measure, which is about 5%. That's one adequate growth measure for current third grade. The one that Ms. Skinner is talking about was the probability of meeting your expectation is for our current fourth graders who have been promoted because of pathways from Kentucky. So there's actually two different adequate growth measures. Adequate growth as it relates to your performance from summer school, your growth from summer school. And then there's an adequate growth measure for fourth graders as it relates to your performance from the fourth grade test to your projected to the fifth grade test.
So I rescind my comment about third grade and move it to fourth grade. Third grade actually makes sense compared to fourth grade.
I guess going back to our 9 students that were retained, did any of them, was any of it because they didn't show adequate growth?
That was not part of the measure for last year's students.
Okay.
That's the new piece.
Okay. In other words, we got a whole new set of, okay.
One layer.
All right. I had last year when we counted down pat, and now it's like.
That's the one change for third graders. They're adding that adequate growth piece. They had it in there at the beginning of the initial legislation last year, and then it changed somewhere along the way. We had a lot of conversations about that, but it is back. So those students that were retained last year did not have to meet that measure. They could go to summer scholars and attend 90% and do tutoring and be able to move on to fourth grade. So that flow chart that we previously went by was for a student that was scoring 1, which is and this one is for a level 2. So if you scored a 2 on TCAP, here's your options. You're not retaking the TCAP. So you can attend summer scholars 90% or be tutored during the fourth grade. So that's the difference between a 1, you have to do both. If you're a level 2, you can retake it or just do summer scholars. If you're a 1, you have to do summer scholars and tutoring. So it's a little bit less. If you don't choose to do those things, you're going to be retained. If you do choose to do one of those things, you can go on to fourth grade.
Mr. King?
Yeah, I mean, this question may have been in your question, I don't know. So when they get to fourth grade and they don't test proficient in fourth grade, they're retained on,
We're going to get to fourth graders in a minute. So this is just third grade right now. Fourth grade has a little bit different rules around it. So this is just third graders right now.
Mr. King, do you remember last year when you were asking questions about what do we do with fourth graders?
I do.
Yeah, now we have that, and it's going to be extremely satisfying for you.
Well, and it's
I don't want to steal the thunder.
It's not been fleshed out all the way yet either.
Okay,
so.
all right.
We're going to share about fourth graders what we know and what they alluded to, but it's not in concrete yet. So, all right. So if you do take the if you do this, we're still in third grade mode right now.
Ms. Skinner? Mr. Gregory?
Excuse me, I just got a text. There's gonna be a fourth grade testing, fourth grade testing this year, is that correct?
Fourth graders take the TCAP every year, but this retention law could potentially impact a portion of fourth graders that we'll get to in just a minute.
Are they gonna do math and reading, or
just reading?
Just the reading?
They take the TCAP for math, but the retention law only pertains to reading.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so we're in that middle column. If the student does retest for TCAP for the ELA portion and does not score proficient, they have to do those 2 things to be able to be retained. If they don't, then they're retained. If they do, they go on to fourth grade. If they do take it, they score proficient on the retake. They don't have to do any of that stuff. They automatically go on to fourth grade. So we're still just talking about third graders here. And then that last column is if a student completes the state's online appeal, they have to be at the 50th percentile, which is grade level in our Ames-Webb screener, which is a universal screener that the state of Tennessee uses to measure those skills. And then they have to complete the appeal to opt out of summer scholars and tutoring. So if they don't meet those benchmarks, but they scored 50th percentile on their universal screener, there is a different pathway for them to be promoted to 4th grade using that screener. Jean, if I misspeak, you hop in here anytime. Okay. So this is the exemptions that was smaller on that second piece of parent communication that's going to go out. This is just a larger version of that. So you can see if your child scores approaching, these are the ways that you can be exempted. That's a 1. If your child scores below, I'm sorry, approaching is a 2. If your child scores below, those are ways that you can be exempt from being retained. I'll just let you read through those and see if you have any questions.
What is the asterisk reference?
The suspected disability is if that paperwork is in process or those meetings are in process, but it is not to completion.
Mr. Lancaster?
Again, going back to last year, I thought, is there some talk of wasn't there a talk of there being an optional or not an optional test, but a different test that would?
That's the screener. So if you potentially score a 1 or a 2 on TCAP and you're doing well on the screener, the 50th percentile.
They've got a.
Is that still in play, or has that been thrown out the window? Or
that's not in play anymore.
So I believe you're referencing the Mastery Connect assessment.
Yes.
We will still do that predictive assessment for all 3rd grade students, 4th grade, 5th grade students in February, but it will not impact the retention law. It didn't last year either. It was just a screener for us to see a predictive assessment on how to do on TCAP. There was talk with lawmakers about there being a standards-based assessment that was approved by the state. That wording was confusing and incorrect. There is not a standards-based assessment approved by the state or provided by the state. It is Ames Web or EasyCVM, a universal screener. So that wording in the legislation is to be fixed. There's not a Mastery Connect provided by the state earlier.
So there is no alternative test outside of taking a retest, is what?
Yes, sir. There'll be just Ames Web, which is our universal screener, and TA Ready. But we'll take a predictive assessment with Mastery Connect presentation.
So last year, Mr. Lancaster, they were talking about adding, because we complained that we wouldn't get the data in time. So they had a broader interpretation, but then they kicked it to this year where they said that they were going to provide an alternative assessment to TN Ready.
Right.
But what they've done now is step back and said that they're going to use the universal screeners with the 50% and not do the alternative. There's just TN Ready or Ames Web, no other pathways.
We give the universal screener 3 times a year, so it's not an added addition because they're used to taking that already.
But if they do, I guess maybe I'm still not hearing my answer that I guess my question. So if they do really well on the screener, does it count over doing poorly on the TCAP?
They have to score it at least the 50th percentile, and then there has to be an appeal filled out to get that approved.
Okay, so that is just a reason to appeal.
Correct.
Okay. At one point, I thought there was.
The difference from last
year, and that's gone.
Okay.
The difference from last year on that was that it was at the 40th percentile, and this year it is at the 50th percentile. So they've raised that where you have to be on the screener a bit.
Going back to appeals real quick, are we allowed to do, are we, being
Right here.
school, is the school allowed to appeal now for students without?
Yes. So here's the changes. What's new? The composite score goal is now the 50th percentile instead of the 40th. So last year we were looking at the 40th percentile. If you scored at least there, you could appeal. This year that mark is moved to 50. So that's one change for 3rd graders. The second change is with written permission from parents. Schools can complete the appeal form for qualifying students, but we have to get written permission to do so. Last year that was all on parents. They did great though.
So we're just gonna send a form out
Mhm.
when you get your score, say, hey, sign this.
Yes.
If you please.
If you want us to help you do this, if you want us to do this for you, or if you want directions on how to do it on your own.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right, so tutoring is layered into the third grade retention law because they have to do it if they score a 1 or a 2, potentially depending on what they choose. So we do offer tutoring sessions right now, currently in this school year, twice a week for 30 minutes. That meets the minimum requirement that they're supposed to do. Sessions may be before, after, or during school, so we're really excited to have the during school part. We just break our groups into smaller groups to meet the ratio that we're supposed to meet, but that really is beneficial for our students who can't come before or after school. We do have students that come before or after school, but those that can't can get that during the day. And then as part of state requirements, all tutors must earn a state certification. That's new this year, and that's a test online that you have to take. We included adding classified staff to be able to do that, but they still have to take the test certification, which gives us availability to a little bit more tutors if they're willing to do that. Oh, I'm pushing the wrong button. And then any K-5 student retained last year in the school year will participate in tutoring for the 22 school year. Is that new this year, or did they do it last year? I thought it was new this year. All right, fourth grade retention. I know. What we know, and this is just what we know. The law does not impact all fourth graders. Who the law does impact are the third graders who got to fourth grade through a pathway. So if a third grader had to attend summer scholars and tutoring, or attend summer scholars or tutoring, this is who it impacts. Those are the students that this law will follow. Current legislation does not impact current fourth graders promoted due to the completion of a program, summer scholars, and tutoring. That's current fourth graders. So that's the fourth graders we have right now. Am I saying that right? Okay. It gets all confusing.
I'm sorry, did you say it does?
Fourth graders.
Did you say it does not?
It does.
It does, okay.
It does. It does impact them. So if they got to fourth grade through a pathway, this is who this is following. Students promoted due to a program must make adequate growth to be promoted to fifth. So these are the kids that got to fourth grade through a pathway. They have to show adequate growth in fourth grade to go to fifth grade. And then for these students, as of now, meeting the adequate growth measure is the only pathway to promotion. So if I got to fourth grade through a pathway, I'm a fourth grader now, I have to make adequate growth to go to fifth grade. Hard stop, period.
So there's no
There's no way, as of now. So this isn't complete. This is what we know as of now.
We partially got there, Mr. King. I didn't see who came first, so Ms. Andrews.
Mine probably involves.
Just making sure too, I understand, and that this didn't change from last year. The non-students who were retained to third grade cannot be retained to third grade this year.
That's correct.
Is that going to be the same for if there are fourth graders that are retained in fourth grade for the next school year? They will automatically get to go the following year.
Yeah, you can only be.
We don't retain
You know,
twice.
They haven't changed that. You can still
Correct.
only be retained the one time.
Mhm.
Okay.
So State Board of Education is currently conducting workshops to discuss plans for supporting their legislation. Second reading's not till January, so this is pending the final state's approval. So this is what we understand right now. Could change in January, but this is the information that we have.
Mr. King.
So,
Came on first.
in fourth grade, adequate growth does not necessarily mean proficient. Is that correct?
Correct. That's that formula that we were talking about.
They can meet adequate growth, but they're not proficient in reading, and they can.
So if they meet their projected scores determined by the state, then they can move. They could go.
Say that one more time.
Their projected scores. That's what the adequate growth is based on.
Okay.
That's how they'll go to fourth grade, and that's individualized for every student.
So they're going to take 50% not on your achievement, but 50% is where they said that you have a chance of being meet or exceed standards. So they take your third grade point and project the probability of you being proficient in fourth grade. Okay, they give you a percentage. So 50% is where they say they want all the kids, right in the midpoint. So let's say that you have a 2% probability, you were a 1 in third grade that got promoted. So let's say you've got a 2% chance based on the projections of getting to proficiency this year. So they're going to take that 48%, they're going to subtract 2 from 50, they're going to take that 48 and divide it by 8, and you've got to increase your probability by 6%. So what's going to be crazy to try to explain to parents is it's not a 6% increase in your performance, it's a 6% increase in your probability running all the fourth graders in the state against each other.
So as soon as we have more information or more concrete information, we'll share with fourth grade families. We have not done that yet, but we will as soon as we are more confident in the information that we're receiving.
Mr. Lancaster.
I'm proud of us for being able to explain the formula.
Decent at math, but I don't even know how in the hell anybody came up with that.
Welcome to the section.
Interestingly, it almost mirrors.
So the students, when you say it's achieve, wait, what was the term?
So the way the way TVOS works is they take what you. So by the time you get to 6th to 8th grade, you got 5, 6 data points in there. So it's a much more accurate projection. Fourth grade, they're projecting just off one data point. Third grade, so looking at your third grade data point and projecting where you should get to fourth grade. Okay, so what they're doing, and they're
setting where you should be.
That's what TVOS is. Like, they project what a year's growth should be. If you go above that, then you're a 4 or 5. If you go below that, then you're a 1 or 2. What they're doing now is they're using that to project the probability of you being meeting or exceeding standards. And they're saying, they're taking that number, dividing it by 8, and saying that that adequate growth is that gap between where you project to go and 50% divided by 8.
The further you are away from that 50% mark, the larger your,
Yeah.
It's harder.
The more you talk about it, the less you'll understand it.
Yeah. So the farther you are away from 50%, the less your probability of getting to met or exceeded is it's harder, it's bigger. You have more ground to cover, for lack of a better word.
I think that makes, to a certain extent, that makes sense. The probability of you being proficient, if you're in the 2 percentile, in the 50th, you know, that part makes sense. The part that doesn't make sense is adequate growth based on that.
It's saying the lower you score, the higher the gains you have to make to meet the standard. Right, so like if you're at 47%, you're taking that 3% dividing it by 8. Now it's going to be harder to bump that probability up because it's going to be easier for you just to be meet or exceed standards. But if you scored really low, you got to make a pretty significant growth to hit that adequately yearly progress. But the problem is we can't. Matt, you have to look at each student individually, and how do you calculate? Like, what do we communicate to a parent that's got a kid that's in that below expectations? We can't say you need to get 5% growth or you're going to get retained. We're going to say you need to get 8% increase in the probability that you're going to meet expectations. So we're not going to say that.
Yeah, we're going to figure out a way to communicate to parents so it's clear and they understand. But Jean's team has done amazing work. We already know all the probability. We have it all figured out. We know what every kid needs to do to get there. We haven't identified who those pocketed third graders are that this is going to impact, but we will.
Yeah.
So even if that child comes in and makes a 3 or is proficient this year, that doesn't weigh into this?
No, if they're proficient, they're good.
Okay.
And this only impacts the students who went to fourth grade through a pathway. It doesn't affect every single fourth grader.
I understand that.
Yeah. I know. Okay, it's 3:30, so I'm going to run through these last slides quickly with you all so that you can get a break before we see you again in just a few hours. So curriculum guide updates. Computer science standards are coming. And so for the 24-25 school year, this is the requirement for incoming freshmen. They have to earn 1 credit of computer science for a regular high school traditional diploma. So the way they can do that is substitute for a 4th year math, a 3rd year science, or an elective course. If they transfer in as a senior from a different state, a country, or non-public, then they are exempt from this computer science requirement.
Ms. Andrews.
How can they substitute a 4th year math if they have to have 4 years of math?
It's going to depend on the individual student. What? Okay, say that again. I think I misheard your question.
You have to have 4 math credits to graduate. So
You can. This is just an option. So they will be able to substitute one of those math classes for the computer science if they so choose. They don't have to do math. They could do a 3rd year science, or they can use it as an elective.
Well,
You can substitute the computer science for a 4th math.
You don't have to. You have other choices. You can do 3rd grade or 3rd year science, or one of the electives will be a computer
right
science.
now, you can substitute AP computer science for 4th math. They're expanding this with this new elective, or this new computer science
So if you
requirement.
take a computer science course for your 4th math, it's considered four math.
it's considered your 4th
Correct.
Right.
or your 3rd science. So what classes do we have right now? You just said AP computer science. What classes that we're offering right now would satisfy?
No, AP computer science is the only one we would have right now. What this is doing is
coming in 24,
there's a new
25.
required course from the state that everybody has to take. To make room for it in the schedule, they're allowing you to substitute it for a 4th math.
Okay, so it's a brand new course. That,
Right.
So
Correct.
It's going to fall in line as that you having to take government economics.
They're
type of thing.
they're requiring every high school student to take a computer science course. And now they're trying to figure out a way, like, it's not as big a deal for us because we have 32 credits in high school with block scheduling, but districts that are, say, on like a 6-period day with 24 credits, this really jams them. So they went back in and gave more flexibility to school systems.
But I would assume that's going to be temporary, a temporary waiver for that until you can get it integrated.
I don't think so. I think that they're
Because you can
looking
always use
because
it as an elective. It'll take one of the places of your elective classes if you don't choose to substitute.
I think they'll leave the computer science in there because it's as good a course or better than some of the 4th year maths. So I don't think that there's really the same impetus. They put the 4-year math when they did the diploma project because there were so many kids that were graduating high school with very limited math classes, so they made every student in Tennessee take 4 maths. I think what they're looking at now is that there's some flexibility that can be given there that better meets the needs of students.
What are we going to do about teachers? Like what teachers will teach this course?
They're going through. There's some teachers that are already going through this training right now, so they'll teach just another block like they do other classes.
Teachers can always teach one class out of a non-tested subject, but there's a training that the state has to certify teachers in teaching this computer science course.
So this is going to be in the incoming curriculum guide.
It's the biggest change in the curriculum guide that you'll see when it's coming in 24-25. They added this addition.
Sorry. So obviously it's easiest to think through this for incoming freshmen. That's where it's going to start, or everybody starting next year?
It starts with incoming
Starts
freshmen.
with the incoming freshmen.
Correct.
Okay.
And then if you transfer to our district when you're a senior in 4 years and you meet one of these criteria, you're just exempt from it.
Hey, I got another guinea pig on this one.
Me too.
It's like I had a 3rd grade guinea pig, and I got a.
Me too.
So, all right, is this coding? Is that what we're talking? I mean, I don't know.
It's a host of different things. I couldn't get into all the standards, but I'm happy to get them for you so you can review them.
Okay, and has the state approved the book or the textbook or so? Yeah.
Just a training course.
No use in working on that too early. Okay, thank you.
Actually, that's another slide. Whoops, doesn't have the. This should say high school and beyond plan, typo on my part, but 8th graders, they currently have a plan that they do for high school. This new plan for 8th graders is a 6-year plan instead of a 4-year plan. So they're building out a plan post-secondary, and that will begin in 8th grade. They're doing that this year, actually. So that plan is prepared by students and parents or guardians, and it's the oversight is by school counselor. If they need help with that, school counselors, teachers, trained staff, they have to go through a small training, but all hands on deck if they need help for that. It's not only the parent's responsibility, but that's reviewed annually and then updated as needed. So if I change my mind as an 8th grader, what my plan looks like as a junior, then they're going to update that plan and get that family information that they need for that particular student. So that started this year, 6 years instead of 4 years. And this Be Pro, Be Proud, we just wanted to share some information with you. This will be quick. We're very proud of this event. Chase and his team did a wonderful job organizing it and getting kids there, and we think it's going to make a really big difference for our students. So we're the 6th state to host this event, the mobile workshop. Have you all seen pictures of it? I think it's kind of been out in a couple places, and some of you were there testing out this stuff. So it was funded via appropriation from Governor Bill Lee and the General Assembly. And then it includes 12 simulators related to careers and skilled trades. We have pictures we'll show you in just a second. So we hosted that launch event on the Ball State campus on October 12th. 20 students came to that particular event and interacted with legislators and the media. Great learning experience for them. So proud of their soft skills that they had with those individuals at that event. 60 students from middle college, high school, and E.B. Wilson attended that day, and then in the afternoon. So we had the morning event, and then these students attended in the afternoon. The mobile workshop returned to our district on November 6th through the 9th. They went to Gallatin High School for 2 days, and then Portland High School for 2 days. All high school students had an opportunity to visit, and we had about 700 kids that participated in the event. And so the next few slides are just some pictures from the morning event at Ball State. That's that original group of 20 kids that were there in the morning. That's some simulators. I believe that one's the welding one. I didn't get to do that one, but because it was busy. There was a lot of people lined up there. It's a bulldozer. I don't remember what that one was in the corner. Do you remember what that one was?
It was with the skid steer.
It was the backhoe.
Oh, it was the backhoe. You're right. Yeah, it was the backhoe. And then this was the lineman bucket that makes you super dizzy when you go up in it. And I'm sure you think you're up in there, but you're really not up in there. And you're like, get me down. And they're like, you are down. So it was super fun. And then the 18-wheeler there on the right. That was some electrical on the left. And I'm not sure what that one was, but you can see the students interacting there with the media and talking to them about what they're doing. This is a really exciting event. I know some of you were there, but we're super proud of it. And Chase and his team did a wonderful job communicating it, getting students there. And he actually said last week it was 4 students, but I think it's increased to 7 who have made a definite decision on their career path that participated in this event that will be going into one of these fields. So that's exciting.
All right. Any instructional questions for Ms. Skinner?
Looks like we're done.
I think we're done. You know,
You don't look tired at all.
For 2 more hours, we'll see everybody in a few hours. We'll buy some more Dose Bros if everybody's hungry.
Your turn. Get a cookie on your way out.